Welcome. In this video, you will learn how to design and develop a portfolio using Figma and Framer. By the end, you will have everything you need to showcase your work and position yourself as a professional web designer. Here is a preview with some pages of the portfolio we'll build. We'll cover the entire process from planning to wireframing to designing to publishing, everything, all right? So pay special attention to this video because it can help you secure more paid projects. The value of this content could easily cost you $2,000 or more. And here you have it for free. It took me a lot of effort to plan and record this 4-hour video, so make sure you don't take it for granted. As always, I will guide you step by step, showing you the real process, including mistakes, corrections, and all the details that make a portfolio truly effective. Before we dive in, I want to invite you to join the Web Designers Collective for free. It's a private, high-quality web design community that I've created filled with exclusive educational content, paid work opportunities, the chance to connect with like-minded designers, and also direct access to me for questions and advice. We are very selective about who we let in because we want to maintain a high-quality and engaged community. But applying takes less than 1 minute, it's free, and it could be life-changing. Go to webdesignerscollective.com and join us today. Here are the topics we'll cover in this video: portfolio planning, creating portfolio pieces from scratch, portfolio maintenance, and designing, developing, and publishing your portfolio. Building a successful portfolio requires thoughtful planning and strategic choices. Before diving into design, it's essential to clarify your purpose, define your audience, and carefully select the work that represents your skills and aligns with your goals. In this lesson, we'll focus on laying the foundation for a portfolio that doesn't just display your work, but also tells a compelling story about who you are as a designer. By defining your audience and setting clear objectives, you will be able to craft a portfolio that not only resonates with the right people, but also opens doors for the opportunities you are seeking. Planning each element with intention will ensure that your portfolio serves as a powerful tool to attract the clients, projects, or roles that align with your vision for the future. Choosing the right platform to host your portfolio is essential, as it impacts your professional image and reach. Ideally, a custom website with your own domain is the best choice for full control and professionalism. But there are also some good free options to consider. Here is a quick overview of both types. The first option, and the one I recommend, is Framer or Webflow. Framer and Webflow allow you to create fully customized, polished websites with full design control. Both support custom domains, making them perfect for freelancers aiming for a nice website. Framer's user-friendly interface makes it great for interactive design, while Webflow offers powerful detail control, ideal for those willing to invest in a premium look. To use Framer or Webflow to build your portfolio, you have to pay a monthly subscription fee, which may not be ideal for everyone. And that takes me to the second option, Behance. Behance is a free community-based platform perfect for building visibility and connecting with other designers. It's easy to upload and categorize projects, making it ideal for those starting out who want some exposure without the cost of a custom site. Behance allows your work to be discovered by potential clients and peers. The other free option is to use Google Drive and Google Slides. Google Drive and Google Slides provide simple free options for hosting your portfolio. Google Drive lets you organize project files and share them as a viewable folder, while Google Slides can serve as a presentation-style portfolio with a coherent linear structure. These solutions are great for beginners or for quickly sharing work with potential and existing clients. The next option is Dribbble. Dribbble is a popular platform for designers, illustrators, and creatives who want to showcase our visually engaging work and attract potential clients. It allows you to post individual project shots, making it ideal for showing off specific design skills or creative concepts. Dribbble is better for short, visually compelling posts, and it works well as a supplement to a main portfolio, especially if you want to reach clients searching for specific design elements. Figma is another option for hosting your portfolio, especially if you prefer a design-focused environment. With Figma, you can create portfolio presentations directly in the app, share live links, and also organize your work in an interactive format. It's also easy to update projects in real time, making Figma ideal for portfolios that require frequent updates or client feedback. LinkedIn is an amazing platform for building a professional network and also for reaching a wide audience. Although not a traditional portfolio platform, LinkedIn allows you to share work samples, build a profile, and increase visibility with other professionals. Adding a portfolio link to your profile can drive traffic to a custom site or a Behance portfolio, for example. Your platform choice should align with your budget, technical skills, and career goals. Framer and Webflow are best for those seeking a high-quality custom site on a custom domain, while free options like Behance, Dribbble, Google Drive, and Google Slides provide accessible, effective ways to showcase your work without any upfront costs. Figma is also an excellent tool to host your project files, allowing easy sharing with potential clients. Here is what I recommend. If you can afford a custom site, use Framer or Webflow to develop it, and then host all your project files in Figma for easy access. Organized Figma files are crucial, as clients may request them for insight into your process. Also use LinkedIn to post portfolio updates, expand your professional network, and keep current clients informed of your career growth and new services. And finally, supplement your reach with Behance and Dribbble, which can help expand your visibility and attract a broader range of clients. If you are in a position where you can't afford a custom site right now, what you can do is share your Figma files and upload high-quality previews of your work on Behance and Dribbble. Then, as soon as you get paid from your first project, build a custom portfolio site. Creating portfolio pieces from scratch is a powerful way to demonstrate your skills, even without client projects. This lesson will guide you through the process of developing self-initiated projects that reflect the type of work you want to attract. With careful planning and thoughtful execution, you can create portfolio pieces that showcase your strengths, creativity, and design approach. The first step is selecting projects that align with your career goals and target audience. Think about the type of work you want to do professionally, whether it's UX UI for e-commerce, web design and branding for small businesses, or web design for agencies. By choosing projects that represent your desired niche, you can build a portfolio that attracts the right clients and also the best opportunities. Start by identifying a few project ideas that excite you and are relevant in the real world. For example, if you want to specialize in designing for fintech companies, consider creating a concept project for a fintech website. If your focus is also branding, create a visual identity for a fictional fintech company. Make sure these concept projects are very high quality. One of the best ways to get feedback is to ask inside our community. If you are not a member yet, you can join by going to webdesignerscollective.com. It's free. To make each project impactful, structure it in a way that walks viewers through your design process. Begin with a project summary that introduces the concept, objective, and any challenges you aim to address. This helps viewers understand the context and purpose of your work. Using mockups can enhance your portfolio pieces, making them look polished and professional. Mockups allow you to present your designs in real-world contexts, like a mobile screen or a desktop interface, which helps viewers visualize how your work would look in a live setting. There are many free and paid mockup resources online. I will leave a link in the description with my favorite ones. A great portfolio isn't just a set and forget, okay? It requires ongoing care and updates to stay fresh and relevant. Maintaining your portfolio ensures it reflects your current skills and any new achievements that may appeal to potential clients and employers. In this lesson, we'll cover strategies to keep your portfolio in top shape, from routine updates to refreshing concept projects and optimizing content for continued visibility. To keep your portfolio aligned with your evolving skills and career, it's essential to review and update it regularly. Schedule a portfolio check every 3 to 6 months to add new projects, update descriptions, and refine visuals. Each update should reflect your most current skills and work quality, ensuring that potential clients see your best, most relevant work. Regular updates also give you the chance to experiment with new features, design trends, or layout improvements, helping your portfolio stay competitive in an ever-changing field. If a significant shift happens in your career or a design focus, let's say you change your niche, for example. So in that case, consider making larger updates to ensure your portfolio reflects this new direction. Not all projects will remain relevant over time, and some may even lose their appeal as your design skills improve. And that's a good thing, because that means you're advancing, right? So periodically review each project to decide if it still represents your current skill level and career direction. When a project is outdated or no longer aligns with your goals, consider removing it or updating it with more recent insights. If you display your work on multiple platforms like Behance, Dribbble, LinkedIn, and your website, make sure each platform is up to date with recent work. Consistent cross-platform updates reinforce your personal brand and ensure potential clients see accurate, current representations of your skills, no matter where they find you. As you complete new projects, request feedback from clients and consider adding their testimonials to your portfolio. Client testimonials build credibility and show that your work delivers results. When gathering testimonials, ask clients to focus on specifics, okay? Like how your work solved a problem or improved their business. Showcase client feedback strategically. Place testimonials alongside related projects to add authenticity and trust to your portfolio. Regularly updating testimonials also highlights your current accomplishments, making your portfolio feel current and credible. To keep your portfolio visually engaging, don't hesitate to experiment with new design elements or layouts during updates. Even small changes like refreshing colors, updating fonts, or even adding some minimal interactive features can enhance the user experience and show that you care about refining and maintaining your work. All right, it's about time to start designing and developing a portfolio from scratch. After design and development, I will show you how to publish it. As I said in the intro, this is an entire process and you will see me identifying mistakes, oversights, and making changes as we progress. You will find all the design files and resources in the description. Remember that this is a marathon and not a sprint, so go at your own pace, and if you get stuck, let me know in the comments or join our community for free at webdesignerscollective.com for more personalized support. To follow along, you will need a computer, internet connection, and access to Figma and Framer. Let's begin. All right, so the first thing we'll do is create 3 pages, and we have one, which is this one, the default one, and we'll change the name to wireframes and the components. And then we'll create another one and we'll call it design, and then another one and we'll call it archive. Now let's go to the wireframes and components page. And now let's create the first frame. And you can do it by pressing F on your computer or by clicking here. Okay, so when you click, you will see these options right here. And then you select this one where it says desktop. You click and here's the frame. Okay, now let's zoom out a little bit and then let's click on the frame and then we drag. Okay, something like this for now. The next thing we'll do is to rename the frame, and you can do it by simply double clicking here. Okay, or you can do it by clicking here, or you can do it by pressing Ctrl R while this frame is selected, and then you can write the name. And we'll name this frame desktop wireframe. For now, we'll change it later. Normally, when I'm designing the wireframes, I don't, set the local styles, okay, like the color styles and all that stuff. I wait until I start designing the hi-fi version. But in this case, I have a clear idea of the colors I want to use. So I will create the local styles right now. To create the local style, we click on the canvas, and then here on the right side, we click where it says local styles. And then we click on color. And now we add a name for our color. In this case, will be black. And I won't use a pure black. I will use this instead, which is a very dark gray. And then we click on create style. Now here we have it. Now I will create the style for the main text, which will be white. And to do that, let's go back here and then click this plus sign. And then we add the color name, which will be white. And here you can either write the code, which is 6 Fs, or you can click here on the color picker. Okay. And then here you can select whatever color you want. In this case, white. And then create. Here we have it. Okay. So we have the black and the white. I also like to create a secondary dark color, and that will be used in some cases where I want a subtle difference in contrast. Okay. To create the color style, we do the same thing. We go here and then we add the name, graphite, for example, and then this is the color code. Create. It's a very dark gray, almost black, but a little lighter than our black color. Okay, so I created 2 more colors. You can see them here. And if you want to follow along, these are the color codes. Okay. And these are the only colors I will use, okay, in the entire website. Okay, now let's start designing the wireframes. And the wireframes shouldn't be perfect. Wireframes are just like a guide, okay, to understand the layout and to play around. So don't worry too much about alignment and stuff like that. Obviously, everything has to make sense, but don't try to be pixel perfect. Before we continue, let's add a name to the design file. To do so, let's go here and then click where it says Untitled, and then we add a name. That's it. Now let's select the background color for this frame. And to do so, we select this frame by clicking. And then here on the right side where it says Fill, we click right here. And then we go to Libraries and we select the black color. And the next thing we have to do is start adding the elements inside of the frame. And we'll start with the logo. And obviously, since this is just a wireframe, most of the elements will be shapes. Okay, so let's create a shape which will represent our logo. And to do so, we select the frame by clicking, and then you can create the shape by going here and then clicking right here. When you click this arrow, you can see different shapes, but we will select the rectangle. You can also create a rectangle by selecting the frame and then pressing R on your keyboard. And then you can draw the rectangle right here. Something like this is fine. And this will represent our logo. Don't worry too much about the size of the elements, okay? Because this is just a wireframe. We'll get the sizing right when we start designing the final version. Now let's change the color of the shape because it's set by default to a light gray, as you can see right here. Okay, so let's change it to white. We click here where it says Libraries and then white. Now we'll create another shape which will represent our menu and we'll place it right here, okay, on the right side. And to do it, we can just select this shape and then press Alt on our keyboard and then click and drag right here, okay? And then we can stretch it by dragging right here. And this will be our menu. And now let's select it. And while we press Shift on our keyboard, let's move it to the right side, right here. Now let's continue creating the other elements. Now that we have the logo and the menu, we'll create another element which will be a text describing who you are and what you do. And when I'm creating a wireframe, I like to represent text with multiple lines. And we'll do it by creating a copy of this shape, okay? And then we move it here. And then we make this shape thinner, like this. Now we can select it again and then enlarge it like this. Now let's create 2 copies of this by doing the same process. One and another one. And this area is very important because here you will describe basically who you are and what you do. And this is one of the most important parts of your portfolio. People, when they go to your portfolio, they have to immediately know what you do. And this description has to be very concise and to the point, okay? Like no fluff. You will have more space to explain more about you in the About page. Now let's create the next elements, but first I want to mention something. I love to create asymmetric designs, okay? I don't like to have everything aligned in one side or the other or everything like perfectly aligned. I like to mix it up a little. You know, I like to use white space. I like to break the monotony a little bit. I like to break the rules sometimes. And to do that, you have to first understand the rules, okay? And always be intentional when you break them. Okay, let's continue. The next element I will create is the title. And even that this is a wireframe and I use shapes for almost all elements, I actually like to write the titles. And this title will say work. Okay, so now let's create the title by clicking on the frame and then pressing T on our keyboard, and then we click again, and then we write work. As you can see, it's like very small because the default font size is 12, but we can resize it by clicking on the text. And then right here on the right side, you will see this panel, and we can change the size like something like 100 pixels, for example. And then here we have it. Now we can move it to the center right here. And as I said before, this can be work or projects or latest projects. Okay. So whatever you want. I like to use work. Before adding the other elements below the title, I like to add right here on the left side or the right side sometimes, these services that I offer. And I will do it by creating a copy of these text elements. So I select all of them, okay? And then I create a copy. And then I make them shorter and then thinner as well. And I will place it in line with the title. And here I will add my three main services like web design, UX, UI design, and the branding, for example. I chose to start with an introduction and the services here rather than a fancy hero image or video, to quickly communicate a focused message that encourages your target audience to explore the rest of your portfolio. So the message has to be very short and direct, okay? So for example, if you are trying to attract creative agencies, you can write something like, I am a web designer, or you can also say UX UI designer who collaborates seamlessly with product teams to craft intuitive digital experiences that users naturally love. Or let's say you want to attract recruiters from Apple. You would say something like, I am a UX UI designer, and here I wouldn't choose web designer. Okay, because usually large companies hire people specialized in these roles, okay? Like these three roles. And this is not like the career path for everyone, okay? This is just a way for me to illustrate one specific valid career path of, a specialization path for web designers. Because, for example, a web designer can specialize in UX UI and then further specialize in UX or only UI, okay? So there are different variables. All right, let's continue with the wireframes. Now, right here, I will place some shapes that will represent the previews of multiple projects. Here we'll add 4 to 6 projects, and they can be your best projects or your latest projects. So let's create another shape by pressing the R key, and then we create a square this time. Something like this. And then we'll make a copy. Now we can select both. And then while we press Shift, we resize them a little bit. So it's a little bit more aligned. Like this is fine for now. Now while we have these two selected, let's make a copy. Place it right here. As I said before, don't worry too much about getting a perfect spacing and alignment because we'll get that right in the next design phase. Now let's select the main frame and then stretch it a little more. Something like this. Now I will change the color of these of the representations of the images. So I will select all of them. And then here on the right side, I will change it to graphite. And this is just a, like a design preference, okay? You can apply any color you want, basically. Now we'll add the project titles below these images. So let's create some space by selecting these two and then dragging them while we press Shift. Right here is fine. Now we'll copy one of these lines and remember, click, press Alt, then drag. We can place it right here. Then let's make it shorter by maintaining Shift. And then let's make 3 copies. One, we'll place it right here. And then we'll make another copy and place it right here. And then another copy right here. Let's move this one up a little bit. Right here. Let's actually make these titles a little bit shorter because they are too long. So let's select them. And then while we press Shift, we make them a little bit shorter. Okay. Now below the previews, we'll add a link that will take us to the work or projects page. For now, let's just copy this shape and then place it here. You can make it smaller and then center it. Now let's create a CTA right here. And a CTA is basically a call to action. We will add something like, let's create amazing things together or something like that. Okay. So let's, copy one line here and then add it here in the center. We can make it shorter a little bit and then center it. And now we'll add the footer. The footer has to be very simple, okay? Here, on the left side, we'll add the copyright notice, okay? And also a link to our privacy policy page. And then on the right side, we'll add a link to the contact page. Let's add the footer elements by making a copy of this. We place it right here. This will be the copyright notice. Then we can make it shorter. Then we make a copy. This will be the link to our privacy policy page. And then we make another copy. We place it here. And this will be a link to our contact page. Now let's resize the frame a little bit like this. All right, so this is the wireframe of the homepage. And obviously we may change the layout. We may add some more stuff. The purpose of wireframes is so we can have an initial idea of where we want to place stuff. So this is not a final design, okay? Things may change. So this is the desktop version. Now we'll create the tablet version and the mobile version. In order to design the tablet version and the mobile version, we'll use two concepts, responsive design and adaptive design. And we already explored these concepts in Module 3. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to Module 3, Lesson 3.6. All right, now let's create the tablet version. And to do so, we click on the canvas and then we press F on our keyboard and then we draw a frame. Now right here in the properties panel, let's set the width to 810 pixels. Now we change the background color to black. And then we stretch the frame like this. Now let's change the name of this frame to homepage desktop wireframe. And then the same naming convention for this one. Homepage tablet wireframe. Now let's start copying all these elements here and we'll do them by sections. So let's select this, the logo, the menu, and the intro text, and then Control C or Command C. Then we select this frame and then Control or Command V. Now we'll move them a little bit to the left. And then we'll resize the width by dragging right here. Now let's copy and paste this right here. Then let's move it here. Now we copy and paste the title here. Let's move it to the center. Now let's select all the previews and the titles and then Control or Command C. And then we paste it here. And now let's resize while pressing and maintaining Shift. Let's make the titles of the previews a little bit thicker. So while we press and maintain Shift, we click on this one and then on this one. Then we go to the properties panel and then we change the height to 6 pixels. And we do the same thing with these ones. Now let's select the footer and the CTAs. Then we copy, select this frame, and then paste. Now let's resize the width of the elements so we can see them. Let's move them up around here. Now let's resize the footer links a little bit. And also this. Something like this. Then let's select this and move it up. And now let's select the frame and resize it like this. As you can see, the layout is the same, all right? But we'll change the menu because instead of having a full menu, like in this case, we'll have a link that will expand when we click, okay? So let's make this smaller since it will be a link that will say menu. And now it's time to design the mobile wireframe. So let's create the frame by clicking on the canvas and then pressing F on our keyboard. Then let's draw the frame, something like this for now. Let's move it here. Now let's select the frame and then change the size here in the properties panel to 390. And then let's change the background color to black. Now let's stretch it, something like this for now. And then let's change the name to homepage, mobile, wireframe. In terms of the names, you don't have to use the exact same names I'm using, but make sure to name the frames. Now let's start adding the elements here in the mobile version. So we will do the same thing we did. We copy this and then paste it here. Move it a little bit to the left. Then resize it, something like this. Now let's select this, move it up a little bit, then stretch it. Because since we have less space in the mobile version, we should set it as full width. Now let's resize this a little bit. And then this. Now let's copy and paste this. We'll place it here for now. And then let's copy and paste the title. Place it here. Now let's resize the title to 60. Then let's center it. And now when placing the previews, we'll use adaptive design. It means that instead of displaying 2 columns, we'll display 1. And we do that because if not, the images would look too small, okay? And I already talked about adaptive design, breakpoints, and responsive design in Module 3, Lesson 3.6. So check it out again if you have to. All right, so let's select and copy these two and then paste them here. And then while they are selected, let's press Alt on our keyboard and then copy them here. And don't worry too much about the spacing and all that stuff and the details because wireframes are not supposed to be perfect, okay? Just make sure that everything makes sense and that you understand the layout, but that's it. Sometimes people try to make very detailed and very perfect wireframes, and that defeats the purpose because you could create a wireframe with pen and paper and that would still be valid. And don't overthink too much during this phase because in the next phase, we'll start designing the final design and then some things may change. So don't worry about getting everything perfect now. All right, now let's continue with the rest of the elements and we can just copy this button. We select this frame, we paste it, we move it here. around here. And then we do the same thing with this. We resize it. Something like this is fine. Now let's add the menu items. So we copy these and then we paste it here. Here we have it. Then we move it down. And then this will be the copyright notice. All right. Then we make another copy and this will be the privacy policy. And then this will be the contact link. All right, so now we have the first wireframes, the desktop version of the homepage, the tablet version, and the mobile version. All right, so here is an exercise for you. As you can see, I've completed all the wireframes. Here is the homepage, then the work page, the playground page, which is basically a page where you can add any creative projects, or any concept projects you've made. And this page is very important because it further shows your capabilities, okay? And your creativity as well. Then we have the services page, we have the about page, then the contact page, and the privacy policy page. And the exercise is basically to replicate these pages, okay? Replicate them because, as they say, practice makes perfect. And if you feel confident, you can create your own version as well. I will explain the thought process in a moment so you can have a better understanding of why I designed the wireframes this way. I will leave a link in the description to a Figma file containing the wireframes. Let's start with the homepage. The homepage is very simple. Here we have the logo, which basically will be your name and last name. Here we have the navigation menu. And then here we have the introduction, which will be basically a description of who you are and what you do. And it has to be written in a very compelling way, okay? Because this will be the first piece of information people will read about you. So you have to make sure it's compelling. Here we'll place your main services, okay? And then here we have a title for the content that follows. Here we will add your availability. And this is important because when people land in your portfolio, they will quickly know if you are available or not. Then here we'll have a CTA that will take people to your work page, like a see more button, something like that. And then here we'll have a link to your contact page. And then here we have the footer. And here we have the tablet version and the mobile version. And I've also added the menus. So when we click this link, this menu will expand, okay? Same thing here. When we click this link, this menu will expand. And now this is the work page and it's very simple. So basically we have the title and then here we have the different previews. And then when we click a preview, we'll go to the projects page. And now I noticed that I forgot to create the projects page. So I will do it right now. All right, so here we have the projects page and here we will add the content of each individual project. Okay, so when people click on one of these previews, it will take them to the projects page. And the project page is very simple. As you can see, we have the title, the description. Here we'll place the, the discipline, for example, UX UI or web design or branding or whatever. And when people scroll, they will see the images, okay, of the project. And then here they will have a CTA that will take them to more projects. And then here a CTA to go to the contact page and the footer. Okay. As you can see here, I like to use some white space in some areas because I don't like to have everything aligned on one side. I like to play with the alignment. Now here we have the playground page and you can call it playground or you can call it concepts or experiments or whatever you want. And the design of this page is exactly the same as the work page. All right. Here we have the services page, which is very simple as well. And here we will list our services. And here we will add some text and a link to book a call. Now here we have the about page. And here we'll write our bio, more in detail. Here we'll add some contact info. And here we can place an image of ourselves or an image of something we identify with or we are inspired by, or even a video, okay, explaining what we do. And here we can add some more information like our experience level, like, junior designer, senior designer, art director, creative director, stuff like that. Here we have the contact page, which also has your availability. And it's important to add multiple forms of contact, like your email, your phone number. This can be, your WhatsApp number or whatever, and then a link to book a call. And here you can add some text, like for example, I reply within 24 hours or something like that. And here we have the privacy policy page, which is basically a title and text. All right, now it's time to start with the high fidelity design. And we'll start with the home page. So we'll copy this. Okay, Control C or Command C if you're on a Mac. Then go to this page and then paste it here. Let's move it. And as you can see, I have a mood board right here. And I will go through it right now. You can create the mood board before designing the wireframes, depending on if the mood board will have an impact on the layout, okay? But in this case, the mood board is going to be more about the aesthetics and some layout as well, but mainly aesthetics. And as I said before, the wireframes are not final. So the layout can slightly change during the high fidelity design. Usually when I'm working on a real client project, I create the mood board right after reading the brief. But in this case, since it's an example that represents my own portfolio, I have an idea of what I want. And since I'm going to use the mood board mainly for aesthetics, I create the mood board right before starting with the hi-fi design. It's basically a matter of preference. So I will go through the mood board right now. I will explain it very briefly. The aesthetic I'm going for is a moody, dark, mysterious, and minimal feel. And that's why I added here this Lego Batmobile, because for me, it represents mysteriousness and sophistication. And the design of the Batmobile is not minimal, okay? It's very complex, very sophisticated, and almost the opposite of minimal. And that's why I added these minimal Greek columns and also these Zen stones, because I want to make sure that even though the design will be somehow sophisticated, because sometimes we will intentionally break the monotony of the layout, it should still be minimal and simple. So some of the images balance out the complexity of the Batmobile, and that's why I added some minimal images here. I have here an image of a black stone because I will use a color that's similar to, to this rocks color throughout the design. It's the graphite color. And here I have more dark images that will help me give the website that moody look. And then I have some more dark images here that will, inspire me to give the website that mysterious look. And this is a design from the Brown Atelier series. It's a beautiful design, and it was inspired by the design aesthetic of Dieter Rams, one of the best designers of all time. And what I like so much about the design of this device is the clean and sharp lines and the overall aesthetic of it. It's beautiful. Here I'm using the images of a black Nike shoe designed by Virgil Abloh. And the reason I'm using these images is because the website will feature some elements in orange. And I like the contrast between black and orange. And I will be also using some large font sizes for the titles. Now let's begin with the hi-fi design. I've quickly created this style guide, and I'm not going to go into the details about style guides because I already talked about it in Module 3, Lesson 3.8. But this will basically help me maintain consistency throughout the entire design. I will include this style guide inside of the Figma file, so that way you will have access to it. Now that we have the style guide, the next thing we have to do is create the color styles. And you can create the color styles by going here to the right side. And then as you can see, I already have the color styles created. but you can create the color styles by clicking this plus sign and then adding a name for the color and then the color code, and then you click on create style. You can find the color code here in the style guide, okay, in this case, right here. So you just have to click and then select this code. You copy it, Control or Command C, and then click on the canvas and then create style. You add a name and then here you paste the code, okay, and then create style. So these are all the colors we'll use throughout the entire design. And in the case we want to add a new color, we'll do it by creating a new color style, okay, as I showed you. So instead of using color codes throughout the design, we'll use color styles because this will make our design cleaner and more organized. The next thing we have to do is to create the text styles. And as you can see here in the style guide, you can see all the different text styles, okay? And the process is the same. You go here and where it says local styles, you click the plus sign and then text. And then here you can add the information, the name, the typeface, the font style, the size, and the line height, and then create style, okay? Let me show you. Let's create the first text style. So as you can see here, we'll separate them by breakpoints. So desktop, tablet, and mobile, okay? We'll start by creating the title one for desktop. So as you can see, the font size is 100 pixels, and then this 120 is the line height percentage. And I talk about this percentage in module 3 when I talk about the grid systems. So what we have to do is again, click on the canvas and then go here where it says local styles, then click the plus sign and then text, and then we add the name. In this case, tiles, desktop. And then we already know that the font family is Inter, okay? It's what we have here in the style guide. Then we'll keep it as regular. And then here we will change the size to 100 pixels. And then here we'll change it to 120%. And then create style. And now you will see the style right here. All right, so here are all the text styles, and there are many, okay, for tablet, for mobile, for desktop. And the thing is, this task is a little bit tedious and it's very easy to make mistakes. So you have to double check them, okay, in order to make sure that all the text styles are correct. And there are better ways to do it though. There are plugins to make these tasks more efficient. And I will teach you how to create color styles and text styles more efficiently in the next module, when we go through advanced Figma techniques and tools. I wanted you to know how to create them manually first. All right, now the last style we'll create is the grid style. And we have all the information here in the style guide, okay, for the different breakpoints. And we'll start with the desktop. And the grid has to have 12 columns, a 32 pixel gutter, and a margin of 40 pixels. So let's do the same thing. We click on the canvas, then we go to local styles, then we click the plus sign, and then this time we select grid. This will pop up. And let's start with the desktop grid. So as a name, we can name it desktop grid. And then we select columns. Then we click on this icon right here to open the settings. And then 12 columns. The color, I will choose blue because I like blue. You can choose any other color. The margin is 40 pixels. And then the gutter, 32. And then we click on create style. Now you will see it here. Now I created the other two grids for tablet and mobile, all right? And we can start with the design now. Let's create a frame right here. So we click on the canvas and then we press F on our keyboard and then we draw a frame, something like this. Then while the frame is selected, we go to the properties panel right here and then we write 1440. Now we have our desktop frame in the proper size. Now the next thing we'll do is to rename this frame. So we double click here and then we write home page, something like this. And now while we have this frame selected, we go to the properties panel right here, then we click, then we go to libraries, and then we select black as a background color. Now let's create the header. But before we create the header, we have to assign a grid to this frame. And to do so, we select this frame, and then here in the properties panel, we click these 4 dots, okay? And then we click on desktop grid. Now we can barely see the grid because we have a black background, and then the grid's transparency is set to 10%, I believe. So we have to change that. If instead of black, we had a white background, we could see the grid, right? But it's not the case because the background is black. And we can fix that by going to the properties panel right here, and then we click here and then edit style, and then here. And here in the color option, we see this percentage, which is the transparency or opacity. Then we have to click and then increase it to maybe 30%. And now we'll see it. Maybe 30% is too much. So let's set it to 20. Now it looks good. We can see it. If you still want to increase the grid's visibility, you can do so by selecting the frame. And then here in the properties panel, we edit the desktop grid by clicking here and then here. And we change the color to a lighter hue, something like this maybe. And now you can see the grid more clearly. And if we change the background color to white, we can still see the grid. All right. Let's change the background color back to black. And let's proceed to create the header. This is the section we'll create. All right. And remember that the final design will not be exactly the same as the wireframes. The wireframes are just like a guide, a reference, okay? So while we have this frame selected, we press F on our keyboard, and then we draw a frame right here. And now we go to the properties panel, and where it says stroke, we click, and then we change the color to white, and then the thickness to 3. And this is just a temporary stroke, so we can, we can see the frame. As you will notice, I will not be naming the layers and the frames one by one manually because Figma now has an AI tool to name multiple layers automatically. So we'll use that. Now let's create the items that will live inside of this header. So let's select this frame. And then while we have this frame selected, we press T on our keyboard, then we click, and then you write your name. In my case, your last name as well. Obviously, this is very small now because the default font size is 12. So let's go to the properties panel and then change the font size. Instead of changing the font size directly here, we click these 4 dots, and then remember that we created the text styles. So let's select the medium text, okay? This one. Now we can see it. Let's move it here for now. Then let's select the frame again and then press T, click. And now we'll write menu, item. Let's go to the wireframes and components page to see how many menu items you have to create. So we have the work page, and then the playground, that's 2, services 3, about page 4, and then contact. Let's go back to the design page. So we need 5 menu items. So let's select this one. And then while we press Alt, we drag and make a copy. Then another copy and 2 more. Now we have all 5. Let's change the names. Work. Then playground. Services. About. And then contact. We can deactivate the grid for now by pressing Shift on our keyboard and then G. Now let's add all these menu items inside of individual auto layout frames. So let's select them individually and then press Shift A on our keyboard. And we'll do the same thing with all these. And this one as well, the logo. And now we'll select all these frames by pressing and maintaining Shift. And then let's press Shift A to create another auto layout frame. Now let's add a temporary stroke to this frame. So let's double click. And then here in the properties panel, we click where it says stroke. Then we change it to white and then 3. And now we can better distinguish the frames. Now the next thing we have to do is select this frame, the header frame, and press Shift A on our keyboard. And now we have an auto layout frame. The next thing is to select the navigation frame. Then here in the properties panel, right here, we will edit the padding. It's set to 0 by default, but we will change it to 30. And we want to apply the padding on all sides. And to do so, we press Control on our keyboard and then we click. And now we can add the padding, 30 pixels in this case. And that's it. Now it added a 30 pixel padding on all sides. Now let me ask you something. Did I add the proper padding, the 30 pixels? The answer is no. Because we are using the 8-point grid system. And the padding has to be a multiple of 8. In this case, we can choose 24 pixels or 32 pixels. So let's select the navigation frame again. We double click. Then here in the properties panel, we press Control, then click, and then we write 32. Then we press Enter. Now the navigation frame is set to 32 pixels, respecting the 8-point grid system. Now when I select this header frame, you will see that it's set to 36 pixels, okay? It can be a different number, but it doesn't matter because we have to set it to 0. So we press Control and then we click and then we write 0. It should look like this. Before we continue, I want to mention something. When I select this frame, I can see here in the properties panel that there is a color code, okay? And this was an oversight, but it doesn't matter because it's very easy to fix. We just have to click these 4 dots and then select the color white. And that's it. Now it's much cleaner. Don't worry too much about oversights because it happens. We are human, right? And when we design a website through Figma, there are so many moving pieces. So oversights can happen. But don't worry though, because in the next module, I will show you a system that I use right before finishing the website to make sure everything is in order. Now let's add a background color to the navigation menu, so this frame. And I will add a very dark color because I want it to be very subtle, barely noticeable. It's just like a small detail. So here in the properties panel, we click where it says fill, and then we select the dark graphite color. And now the navigation menu has a very subtle background color. Now we can remove the strokes in these 2 frames. So we select this frame, and then here in the properties panel, we remove the stroke by clicking here. And we do the same thing with this frame. And now we are starting to get that Batman feel, like the graphite, the dark graphite color in the navigation menu against the black background gives us that mysterious feel. Now let's add a subtle corner radius because, the sharp angles makes the menu look a little unpolished. So I want to add a subtle corner radius. So we click, then we go here in the properties panel, where it says appearance, and we will add a corner radius of 6 maybe. And now it looks a little better, right? It's barely noticeable, but these small details count. Now we rename the layers using a cool AI feature. All right, so to do it, let's select the main frame. So we have all the layers selected. All right, and then here at the bottom, we click this icon right here, and then we click on rename layers. And as you can see, it will start renaming the layers automatically. We have to wait a little bit. Now, awesome. Now, since we know that this header will be repeated throughout the the entire portfolio, we should create a component. I already talked about components in depth in module 3, but components basically work this way. So when you have a component and then you make a change to that component, all the instances that are linked to that component also change. Let's say you have 10 pages and then you don't have components. If you want to change, or add a menu item, you would have to do it in all the pages individually. But if you have a component, you only have to edit the component. So let's first go to the wireframes and components page right here. And then right here, let's create a frame. And here we will add our components. What I like to do is to resize these components frame to the same size as the breakpoint I'm working with. For example, let's go right now to the design page so I can show you. When I select this frame, I can see that it's 1440, right? So I like to also resize these to 1440. And I do this because I will also apply the grid to this frame in order to control the size of the elements. So let's do that right now. While we have these frames selected, we go here in the properties panel, and then we click these 4 dots, and then we apply the desktop grid. Now let's go back to the design page. And then we select this frame. We press Ctrl+C or Command+C on our keyboard. Then we go to the wireframes and components page. And then while we have this frame selected, we paste the frame here. Now let's select this frame again. And then in the properties panel, we change the background color to black. Let's press Shift+G to hide the grid for now. And then we select this frame. We right click, and then we click on Create Component. And now, as you can see, the selection outline turns purple because this is a component now. Now, while we have this frame selected, we press Ctrl+C. Then we go back to the design page. And then we remove this frame. Then we select this frame and then paste the component. And now this is not a component, okay? This is an instance of the component. So let me show you. We have now 2 pages, the home page and then the services page. And they both have the same instance, okay? So if I go to the wireframes and components page, and then I change the background color of the navigation menu, let's change it to this orange. It also changes in both pages, all right? So it's very efficient. And as I said, I explained this in detail in module 3. So go back and watch it if you still don't know how it works. Now let's go back to the wireframes and components page, and then let's change the color again to dark graphite. And now let's select this component and then rename it. So we know this is the desktop version. And now we have all the pages inside of the navigation menu, and we'll create a button right next to it. And that button will be a call to action for people to book a call. To create the button, we'll basically select the navigation frame, this one, and then we'll press Alt and then drag outside of the frame to make a copy. And then we'll double click on playground. And then while we press Shift, we select all these, and then we'll delete them. And now here we have the button. Now we can simply press Ctrl, double click, and then write book a call. Now here we have the button. Now we'll press Ctrl and then click on book a call. Then we go to the properties panel, and then we change the color to black. Then we select the button, and then we go to the properties panel again, and then we change the background color to white. And the next thing we have to do is to move this button inside of this frame. Now we select the navigation frame, and then we press Shift. We select this frame as well, this button, and then we press Shift A to create a new auto layout frame containing these two frames, the navigation menu and the button. And then here in the properties panel, we'll change this space to 32 pixels, which is this gap right here. Now let's click here multiple times, and we select this frame, okay, the navigation container. And then here in the properties panel, we have to change this to 48 pixels. So it's a multiple of 8. Now let's select the header, and then let's click on this icon, and then rename layers. Now let's go back to the design page, and let's create the next section. So here we have the copy I will use for the home page. And as you can see, it's very simple and to the point. Still, I'm being very meticulous with the message. As you can see, we have the opening statement, the service description, plus the target market, and then the value proposition. And in terms of the niche, I selected these three because they are related. So basically, if you work with a luxury real estate firm, they can refer you to an interior design or architecture firm, right? And the services I'm going to offer to all of them are very similar. So choosing niches that are related is a smart move. All right, so let's go back to the design file, and then we click inside of this frame, and let's create a frame. You press F, and then we draw something like this. Now we select the frame, and then we add a stroke right here. Set it to white, and then 3. Now I will go back to the document, and then I will copy this. I will create a frame right here to host the text for a second. I will move it here. Let's resize it first. Now, instead of just copying and pasting it here, I will place the first line on the left side and then the rest on the right side. And I will do this because this first line is powerful. And we tend to read first what's on our left and then move to the right. And that's called the F or Z pattern, especially for languages that read left to right. Now let's select and copy this line. And then we paste it inside of this frame. Then while we have it selected, we go to the properties panel, and then we change the color to white so we can see it. Now we'll select this frame and then activate auto layout, Shift plus A. And then we'll select the text and then Shift plus A as well. Now let's do the same thing with this paragraph. So we select it, and then we copy it. Then we select this frame, we paste it here. And then while we have the text selected, we go to the properties panel, and then we change the color to white so we can see it. And now while we have this text selected, we press Shift A. Now it's an auto layout frame. Now let's change this frame's padding. So whatever padding you have here, you have to set it to 0. So let's select this frame. And then here in the properties panel, we press Ctrl, then we click, then we write 0. All right, should look like this now. Now let's show the grid, and then let's resize this frame like this. We can hide the grid now. Now we select this frame again. Then we go to the properties panel right here, and then we select this alignment. tap center. And now we double click and it will look like this now. Okay. And now we can remove this stroke. For this section, we will not create a component because we'll only use it here in the home page. Now let's remove this and then let's select this paragraph and this line. So we press and maintain Control, then we click. Now while we have Control pressed, we press Shift on our keyboard and then we click here. And now we can release the keys and then go here. And then select large text. Now let's select this frame by double clicking this one. And then we go to the properties panel and we set it to hug contents. Now we double click again to select the text and then we set it to hug contents as well. Now it should look like this. Let's double click here to select this frame and then we press Shift plus G to show the grid. And now we resize this frame so it aligns with the grid right here. Now that the column grid is visible, I want to mention something here. In the navigation menu, as you can see, the container doesn't align perfectly with the grid. And that's okay, that's intentional because we are letting auto layout do its job. And all the spacing and padding is respecting the 8-point grid system. And that's what really matters. Now I will make sure that everything looks nice. Okay, I notice here that we should remove the padding on the sides. All right, so we go to the components page and then we select this frame. And then here in the properties panel, we set it to 0. And now it's aligned. We can hide the grid for now. I may change the alignment of this paragraph later, but for now I will keep it like this. When I add the rest of the content, I will zoom out and see if I have to change something. Let's quickly check the wireframe again. Now we'll add the services and then the title for the content below and then the availability. So let's do it. Let's click on this frame. Then we add a frame by pressing F on our keyboard. And then we draw something like this. Then we do the same thing in the properties panel. We add a stroke. We set it to white. And then 3. Now let's show the grid. And then let's stretch this. Let's hide the grid now. Now let's click inside of this frame and then we add a frame. This frame will contain the services. Then we make a copy of this frame. This will contain the title. And then we make another copy. This will contain the availability. And now we select this frame on the left and we'll press T on our keyboard and we will click and then write our first service, which is web design. Now we'll change this font size to small and see how it looks. So here in the properties panel, while we have the text selected, we change it to small text. And now let's make a copy. And then we can write branding. And now we make another copy and we write consulting. And now we'll select each of them individually and we'll activate auto layout, Shift plus A. Now we'll select this frame and then Shift plus A to activate auto layout. And now while we have the frame selected, we go here in the properties panel, and here we press and maintain control on our keyboard, and then we click, and then we set this to 0. Now we make sure that all these are set to hug. So we have to change this one. All right. Now let's select these frames while we press and maintain Shift to select them all. And then we go here in the properties panel. Then we press and maintain control. Then we click, and then we set this to 0 because we don't want any padding. Now let's select this frame. And then let's go back to the properties panel. And then let's set this spacing between items to 8 pixels. Like this. And then we set the width to hug here in the properties panel. Now let's create the title, which will be inside of this frame. So let's select this frame, and then we press T on our keyboard, and then we write work. Now let's go to the properties panel, and then we change the text size to titles. Let's move it a little bit right here, and then let's press Shift A. And now we select this frame, and then Shift A as well. Now while we have this frame selected, we go to the properties panel, and then we set it to hug. And then let's select the frame containing the title, and then we set it to hug as well. And now let's remove the padding. So let's select this frame, and then in the properties panel, we press and maintain control, then we click, and we set it to 0. Now let's do the same thing with this frame containing the title. So we select it, and then here in the properties panel, we press and maintain control, then we click, and then we set it to 0. Now let's add the availability right here. So let's copy one of these, and then we select this frame, and then we paste it. And then here we'll write, I am currently available for new projects. Now we'll select this frame, and then we'll activate auto layout. Now we'll select the text layer right here, and then in the properties panel, we set it to field container. Now let's double click here. So we select this frame, and then we resize it. Something like this. This is purely for aesthetics because I want this to be displayed in 2 lines instead of 1. Now let's select all these layers, and then we'll rename them by clicking here. All right. Now let's select this frame, and then activate auto layout. Let's show the grid, and then we stretch this so it aligns here. Then we can hide the grid. Now while we have this frame selected, we go to the properties panel, and then we align it to the center, and then we double click. Now let's go back to the properties panel, and then we press and maintain control. Then we click here, and we set it to 0. Now let's select this frame. And then here in the properties panel, we can see a color code. So we'll change this to a color style. So let's select white. And then we can also remove the stroke. Now let's select these 3 frames while we click and maintain Shift. And then when we have all of them selected, we go to the properties panel, and then we remove the stroke. Now let's go back to the wireframes. And this is the section we'll create now, the project previews. And to do so, we go to the wireframes and components page right here. And then we show the grid. And now we click, and then we press R on our keyboard. And then we press and maintain Shift. And then we drag to draw a square. Now let's move it here for now. Now, since we have 12 columns, let's resize this square so it covers 6 columns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All right, so let's select it, and then let's press and maintain Shift to keep the aspect ratio, and then let's resize it right here. Now we will hide the grid, and then right here below the square, we will add some text. So we press T on our keyboard, and then we click, and then we write project title, and then you can use an M dash or a hyphen, all right? Or a comma if you want. That's up to you. Now we select the text, and then here in the properties panel, we change the size to medium. Now while it's selected, let's press Shift A to activate auto layout. Let's do the same thing with the square. Now let's remove the padding on both. And now let's select them and then press Shift A. Now let's show the grid, and then let's move this to make sure it's properly aligned. And now we can hide the grid again. Now let's select this frame, and then let's rename it right here. We can rename it project preview card. Let's stop. And now we can use this option while we have the frame selected to rename the rest of the layers. And now let's turn this into a component. So we right click, and then we click here where it says create component. Now I will change the color of this square. You can leave it as it is, but I prefer to change it to graphite. Now let's make sure this card is responsive, because now if we resize it, nothing happens, right? So let's select the image, okay? And then we go here in the properties panel, and then we set it to fill container, and then fill container. So the width and the height are set to fill container. And now we do the same thing with the image container. So we select this layer, and then here we make sure the height is also set to fill container. And now when we try to resize this card, this happens, all right? It's responsive. Now let's select and copy this component. So Control C, and then we go to the design page. We select this frame, and then we paste it here. Now let's show the grid, and then let's align this right here for now. Now let's select this instance, and let's make 3 copies. 2, and then 3. Perfect. Now let's select these 4 instances, and then press Shift A to create an auto layout frame. Now we have to make sure that this space and then this space are multiples of 8, because we are using the 8-point grid system. And upon looking at this space, I can see that it's 33 pixels, and it should be 32 pixels. So let's go back to the component and see what happened. Now let's show the grid. Then let's select the component, and then I will zoom to see pixel by pixel. And now I can see that it's 1 pixel short. So I will press and maintain Shift, and then resize it. Let's hide the grid. Then go to the design page. Now let's go to the properties panel, and let's change this to 32 pixels. The reason why we are seeing these instances like this, it's because this frame is 1 pixel short. So let's activate the grid, and then I will show you what I mean. All right, as you can see, it's 1 pixel short. So let's press Shift and maintain Shift, and then we resize it. Now it looks good. And I just show you the beauty of using components because we saw an error, right? And then we went to the component and then we fixed the error on all the instances simultaneously. Now while we have this frame selected, the frame containing the instances, we go here and then we change this to hug contents. Now let's change this spacing to 56 pixels, multiple of 8. Now let's go back to the component and then let's change this space to 32 pixels. And then let's go back to the design page. And now it's time to add the images here. And what I like to do is to show a mockup. If you are wondering what a mockup is basically a visual representation of a design concept. And here, for example, we can see a part of a website displayed on an iPad. And here we have this hero section of a website displayed on a MacBook. Mockups enhance your designs by displaying them in a real-world context. There are many websites where you can download mockups for free, and you can also buy premium mockups if you need something more specific. Usually, premium mockups are better quality and also more exclusive. I will leave a link in the description that will give you access to a list where you will find a bunch of different websites where you can download mockups for free, and you will also find a list of websites to buy premium mockups. After you download a mockup, you will see a PSD file. And if you have Photoshop installed, when you double click, the mockup will open inside of Photoshop. So after the mockup is open, here on the right side, you will see a bunch of different layers. And usually you will see a layer that says your design here or placeholder or something like that, right? And this is the layer you will edit. So after you identify the layer you have to edit, you just have to double click and then this new tab will open. Now you can hide these two layers by clicking on this eye icon. And then here at the bottom, you click on this plus sign to create a new layer. And now you can see the new layer here. Now you will see this empty, and here is where we will place our design. So here is a design I created as an example, and I will use it for the mockup. And to do so, I will select this frame, and then right click, and then select here where it says copy or paste as, and then copy as PNG, and then I click. And then here I will wait until it says copied as PNG. And now with Photoshop open, I will paste it right here. And now while this layer is selected, all right, I will go where it says edit right here. And then I will click on free transform. And now I will resize this so it fits the frame. And here on Photoshop, you don't have to press and maintain shift to keep the aspect ratio. Now, if I go to this tab containing the mockup, this is what I see. But then if I go back to this tab and then I save this by pressing Ctrl S on my keyboard, and then I go back to the mockup, perfectly placed. On mockup, sometimes you can also change the background color. For example, in this case, here in the layers panel, if I double click here, this window will open and then I can change the color, all right, to whatever I want. And then what I like to do is that since these are squares, I will also save the mockup inside of a square. Okay, I will add it to a square and then save the file. That way, when I import the image right here, it will fit perfectly. Let me show you what I mean. I will go to the component first. Then I will select the image. And then here in the properties panel, I can see that it's not a perfect square, but almost, right? So I will use this size, this width, and this height to create a new image on Photoshop. So here in Photoshop, I will create a new file. So I will click here where it says file, and then new, and this will pop up. Here we have to make sure that this is set to pixels, and then we'll add the width, which is 664, and then the height, which is 680. And then we'll click on OK. Now we have here the square. Now we'll resize this so the image has a larger resolution. And to do so, we go here where it says image. We click, then we click on image size. This will pop up. Then we click on this icon right here to maintain the aspect ratio. And then we'll resize this to 1200 pixels. And then we click on OK. Now let's go back to the Mockup tab. And then I will change this background color. So it's exactly the same as the graphite color we are using to design our website. So here inside of Figma, I will go to the properties panel, and then I will select the graphite color, and then I will click here, and then I will copy this color code. Now back in Photoshop, I will go to the layers panel right here, and then I will double click here. Now this window will pop up. And then I will paste the color code. I just copy it here. And then I will click on OK. And now the background color is applied. And it's just a little bit lighter than what we had, right? We had this color, okay? And then we change it to this color. Now let's go to the layers panel. And then let's right click on any of the layers. This one, for example. And then let's click on merge visible. Now let's press Ctrl A to select the entire image, and then Ctrl or Command C to copy it. Now we go to this tab containing the file we previously created. And then we press Ctrl or Command V to paste it right here. Now let's make sure we have the image selected. So here in the layers panel, we click once. And then we go to Edit. And we click on Free Transform. And now let's resize it. All right. And make sure to not press and maintain Shift, because unlike Figma, you don't have to do that on Photoshop. You can place it somewhere like here, for example, looks good. And then we press Enter. Now let's save our image. And to do so, we'll go to File. And then instead of Save As, we go to Export, okay? Because we'll optimize the image first. Now click on Export As. And this window will pop up. And here we can see the file size right here, all right? And then if the file size was like 1 megabyte, for example, that will be too large. So here, when it says File Settings, we would adjust the quality of the image in order to get a more efficient file size. So if the file size is too large, we would have to compromise on quality. But this image is 271.7 pixels, so it's fine. You should always aim for images that are under 500 kilobytes. If you need to display an image that's very large, you can go up to 900 kilobytes, because sometimes you can't compromise on quality, okay? But try to keep most images below 500 kilobytes. Okay, so now the next thing is to click on Export right here. And then I will change the name to something like this. And then save. All right, so now here in Figma, we'll add the image right here. So let's click until the square is selected. Make sure you select this layer, okay? This one. And now here in the properties panel, where it says fill, it says graphite, right? We click on this color, and then we click on custom, and then we click on this image icon, and then we click on upload from computer. Now navigate to the folder that contains the image, and then double click. And now we can see the image right here. I followed the same process and added these other projects. And then I also added the titles, okay? And as you can see, not all of them have to have the same background color, all right? I mix it up a little bit. And I use mockups, right? And I use screenshots, I use photos, so feel free to mix it up. Now it's time to create the CTA that will take users to the work page. And to create it, we'll click inside of the frame, and then we'll press T on our keyboard, we'll click again, and then let's write more projects. Now, while we have the text selected, we go to the properties panel, and then we change the text size to CTA text. Now we keep the text selected, and then we press Shift A to activate auto layout. Now let's double click to select the text, and then let's apply the color style. Now let's add this arrow, and you will find a link in the description that will take you to a folder with all the assets, the images, the icons, and all that. So let's drag the arrow here. Now let's select this frame, the frame containing the arrow, and then here in the properties panel, we activate this. So we click in order to maintain the aspect ratio, and then let's resize it to 40 pixels. And now let's move it inside of this frame. Now I will select the frame, and then here in the properties panel, I will change the spacing to 24 pixels. And now while we have this frame selected, we'll press and maintain Shift and then select this frame, and then we'll activate auto layout. And then here in the properties panel, we change this to 120. Remember that we are using the 8-point grid system, so make sure that the spacing is always set to a multiple of 8. Now, while we have this frame selected, we select this frame while we press and maintain Shift, and then we activate auto layout. And we'll set this spacing also to 120 pixels. Now the next step is to design the footer. Let's go to the wireframe to check the layout. Okay, so we have 3 items. And this was basically a CTA for people to book a call, but since we already added the button in the menu, we don't have to add it here. Now let's create a frame, something like this. And while we have this frame selected, let's press T on our keyboard, and then let's write copyright. Then we make a copy, and then we write privacy policy, and then we make another copy, and then we write contact. Now let's select them all, and then let's change the text size to medium text. Now let's select the copyright and then the privacy policy, and then let's activate auto layout. Here we have to apply the same spacing we use in the navigation menu. So let's check. It's 48 pixels. All right. So let's select this frame, and then in the properties panel, we set this to 48 pixels. And now while we have this selected, we go to the properties panel again, and then we change this to hug contents. Now let's select the contact, and then let's activate auto layout. And then while we have this selected, we go to the properties panel, and we have to make sure that the padding is set to 0. Now while we have this frame selected, let's select this frame as well. And then let's activate auto layout. Now let's select the container, and then we activate auto layout as well. Let's stretch it. Now here in the properties panel, change the horizontal padding to 0 pixels. And then the vertical padding, whatever padding you have here, change it to 40 pixels. And now we have a proper alignment and spacing. Now let's add a 3-pixel border to the top of this frame. So let's go to the properties panel here where it says stroke, and then let's click and then let's select the white color. Let's set it to 3 pixels. And then here in this square, we click and then we select top. And now we can see it here. It's a very simple footer, but this is how I like it. I don't like to add too much stuff in here. I like to keep it very minimal. Now let's select this frame and then let's rename the remaining layers. Now let's select the footer and then we press and maintain shift and we select this frame as well. And then we activate auto layout. Now we go to the properties panel and then we change the spacing to 200 pixels. Now while we have this frame selected, we select this frame as well. And then we activate auto layout. Then we go here to the properties panel and then we change this to 176 pixels, which is a multiple of 8. Now while we have this frame selected, we select the header as well and then we activate auto layout. Then we go to the properties panel and then whatever spacing you have here, set it to 144 pixels. Now let's select this frame again and then let's activate auto layout. We go to the properties panel and then we press and maintain control, we click and then we set it to 40 pixels. Now we have a padding of 40 pixels on all sides. There is something that doesn't convince me too much about this area right here. Because since we are using one frame on each side and they have different widths, the title is not centered. So what I will do is to select this frame and then move it here. And then while I have this selected, I select this and then activate auto layout. And then now in the properties panel, we change this to this arrow, vertical layout. Now it's displayed like this. Now let's set it to fill container. I mean the height to fill container, right? And then double click here to add automatic spacing. Now it's perfectly aligned. Now let's select this frame, the title, all right? And then we press the left arrow on our keyboard once. So now we have the home page almost completed. We just have to create the rest of the components. And the rest of the components will basically be the CTA and the footer. So let's select and copy both. And then paste them inside of the wireframes and components page. Right here. Now let's convert them into components. Now let's copy the CTA and then we go to the design page again. And then we select this frame and then we paste the CTA. Now let's remove the footer. Then we go to the wireframes and components page. We select this component, then we copy it. We go back to the design page. Then we select this frame and then we paste it right here. Now let's go back to the wireframes and components page. And then let's make sure we rename the components correctly. So here in the layers panel, we change the name to footer, desktop, and then CTA, desktop. Then let's change the default text for the CTA. Now we just have to change the text here in the home page. And that's it. Now we have the home page completed. And the next step is to create the tablet version, then the mobile version, and then all the other pages. Now let's select this frame again. And then here, we click on rename layers to make sure that all remaining layers are named correctly. All right, so I've designed all the pages, and as you can see, we have the dark mode right here, and then the light mode right here. Here we have the home page designed for desktop, for tablet, and then for mobile. And then here we have the work page. All right. Then here we have the project page. And as you can see, here it's very important to also add a link to the Figma file. And this is important because sometimes clients, for example, if you are working with an agency or with a company, they want to see how your file is structured, and giving them access through your portfolio makes things way easier. Here, I like to add a little description about the project, and it has to be brief because this is not a case study, okay? And then here we have all the images. I like to add 3 or 4 images maximum, but sometimes if the project is like a large project, I add more. But then I have this animation loading more images as we scroll. And I created this animation just for reference, right? Because we'll only use it if we add like very large files that take longer to load. So we probably won't be using it for this design. Here I have the playground page. Here I basically add different projects and concepts and stuff that are not directly related to web design. And as you can see, I use a totally different background color to completely visually break from my web design work sections. All right. The playground is supposed to be fun, different. And that's why I intentionally changed the colors. So here's an example. This is a media control device that I designed, and it's intended to be a physical product. So it has nothing to do with web design. And then here we have the about page, which combines, a brief bio and then the services. As you can see, I combined them, and I removed the services menu item since it's not longer necessary. Here I have some contact information, and it's important to, use WhatsApp nowadays because a lot of people use WhatsApp, especially in Europe. But in the US, back in the days, almost no one used WhatsApp, but now people is using it a lot. So make sure to also use WhatsApp. Here, as I said, we have the services, okay, all the services. And then here, I like to add also a photo. It can be a photo of you or a photo of something that inspires you or whatever. Just make sure that it's high quality. And in this page, you can also add all your social links. Here we have the contact page, which is very, very simple. All right. You just have here all the ways people can contact you. All right. Never forget WhatsApp, and then a link so people can book a strategy session. And don't worry about it because in module 12, I will show you how to set it up. And never forget to tell people how long will it take for you to reply to them. It has to be approximate, but always get back to people within 24 or 48 hours maximum. And then here we have the privacy policy page. Very simple, the title and then the text. I will give you access to this Figma file. You can find the link in the description so you can see everything in more detail. And remember, you don't have to copy everything that I do. All right, do everything your way, but then take into consideration my way of thinking and then the technical aspects and all that. Because if all of you design the same way, like the same portfolio, it may not be as effective. All right, you have to add your own unique personality. And now it's time to start developing the website using Framer. All right, so if you don't have a Framer account, go to framer.com. And then here on the top right, click on sign up. Now here you can choose to continue with Google or continue with a different email service if you want. I will continue with Google. I already signed in into my Google account, but like if you haven't, you will probably see a screen where you can choose your Google account, all right? And then after that, you will see this page. Here you have to add your last name, in my case, and then check this box and then continue. And then you will be taken inside of your Framer account. The first thing I want you to do is to install the desktop app. And to do so, here on the right side, you will see this option where it says Git desktop app. And all you have to do is click on install. You will be taken to this page. Now click on download for Mac or download for Windows. For me, it's Windows. And then once you download the app, install it on your computer. So after installing, opening the app and entering your credentials, you will see this page. And this is basically your dashboard, all right? So all your projects, all your websites will be placed here. Here on the top left, you will see this option, right? And then when you click, you will see, your workspace, right? Where it says my workspace, that's the workspace you are in. So this, okay? And then whenever you are working with a real client, you can create a workspace for them. So when you click here, you will see this pop up. And then here you can add the workspace name and all that. And then when you create it, your client will have access to this workspace. Okay, you give the client access and then they can handle the billing, but then you can be in charge of the maintenance, all right? And if your client wants full ownership of the entire project, you can transfer it to them. That basically depends on the agreement between you and your client. Here you have also the option to change it to dark mode, right? Where it says night mode. And here you have access to other sections. So feel free to explore them. Whenever you want to invite a new member, you can do so by clicking here. And you can also create a new project by clicking here. To access all the main options offered by Framer, you have to upgrade to a paid account. And to do so, you click on this icon right here, and then this will pop up. Now go to plans right here, and then upgrade. And here you will see all the plans. You can pay yearly, but since you are just starting out, you can also toggle this off and then pay monthly, all right? It's a little bit more expensive, but then you don't have to pay for the entire year upfront. Then click on subscribe. Now you will see this page, and then all you have to do is add your payment information and then click on pay and subscribe. All right, so after subscribing, open the app again and then click on the project. And now it's time to start developing the portfolio. The first thing we'll do is to change the size of the desktop breakpoint, because here in Framer it's set to 1200 and we have to change it to 1440, right? The same size we are using in Figma. And to do so, we click inside of the canvas, and then here on the properties panel, we change this to 1440, and then we press enter. Now let's create the other two breakpoints, tablet and mobile. And to do so, we click this plus sign, and then we click on tablet. Then we do the same thing, and then we click on phone. All right, so now we have the three breakpoints, desktop, tablet, and mobile. And the next thing we'll do before we forget is to change the name of the project. So here at the top, we click, and then we change this to portfolio. And now let's add the grids. All right, so I'm here in Figma and I've changed the theme to dark mode because since I'm using dark mode in Framer, it makes sense to also use dark mode in Figma. And if you want to change the theme in Figma to dark mode, you can do so by going here and then preferences, theme, and then you choose dark. All right. And then after you do that, you click on the canvas, and then here where it says page, you change the color to a darker color. You can use, you can change it to this color code as well, or you can use a different shade if you want. Inside of the Figma file I've shared with you, you will see this page, the style guide. So click. And then what we'll do now is to export this style guide and then import it into Framer. If you are using your own style guide, it's the same process, all right? To export the style guide and then import it into Framer, we have to use a plugin. So we right click and then we go to plugins and manage plugins. And then here we search for Framer. Now we see the plugin right here. We double click and then we click on run. Now let's select this frame. Then we right click, plugins, and then Figma to HTML with Framer. All right, we click. And then you will see here at the bottom how it copied all the layers. The next step is to open Framer, and then here on the left side, we click on this plus sign, all right, to create a new page. And then we'll name this page Style Guide. Now make sure this frame is selected by clicking inside and then pressing Ctrl or Command V. You know, to paste the style guide. Now select the main frame by clicking here. And then we will change the width. So in the properties panel, we change it to 1920, which is the width we are using in Figma for the style guide. And then change the height to fit content. Okay. Now scroll down all the way to the bottom until you see the grid. And then we'll start by creating the style for the desktop grid. And to do that, we go to the home page. Then here on the top left, we click on the Framer icon. And then we go to View. And then we click on Show Guides. Now we select the desktop frame. And then here in the Properties panel, where it says Guides, we click. And then it will add by default the 12-column grid. Now let's go back to the style guide and then see. Okay, so it's 12 columns for desktop and then 32 pixel gutter and then a 40 pixel margin. Then we go back to the home page. And then while we have this frame selected, we go to the properties panel, we click. Then we click on this alignment. So it stretches and adapts. And then the gap, which is the gutter, is 32 pixels. And then the margin is 40 pixels. And then we do the same thing with the tablet. So we select it, and then we go to the style guide, and then we check. All right, so 8 columns, 24 pixels gutter, and then 40 pixel margin. We go back to the home page, and then we make sure this is selected. And then we go to the properties panel, and then here we click again, and then we change this to 8 pixels. And then this to 24 pixels, and then we leave this as 40 pixels. And then now we can see the grid updated here. Now we go back to the style guide page, and then we check the mobile. So it's 4 columns, 16 pixels as the gutter, and then 16 pixels as the margin. We go back to the home page, and then we do the same process. 4 columns, then 16, and 16. All right, so now that we have the grid, it's time to create the color and text styles. And to do that, let's go to the style guide. Scroll up until you see the colors, all right? And then we can already see that we have to add the black color and then white, and then these other 5 colors. Let's start by adding our color black. So let's zoom in and then let's copy the color code, Control or Command C. And then here, next to pages and layers, you see assets, click here. And then where it says styles, click the plus sign. And then click on color style. Now let's paste the color code here. Let's add the name, black, and then create. And now we have the color code here. Now let's create the color white, but instead of copying the color code, we'll basically use the color picker. So we do the same thing right here and then color style. And then here you click on the color picker and then you select the color. And you will see how it adds the color code automatically. Now you add the name, white in this case, and then click on create. And now we have both colors, black and white. Now create the rest of the color styles by following the same process. And the next thing we'll do is create the text styles. Scroll down until you see these, typography and font sizes. I switched to Figma for a second, and I want to show you something. I already showed you how to create text styles manually, right? By adding this information right here, like manually. You click here, and then you add the information, right? That is another way to do it. Let me show you right now. A more common and efficient way to do it is to apply the style beforehand. For example, if I select this title, right, and I go to the properties panel, I can already see the information applied. And if I want to create a new text style based on this information, I can do so by clicking these four dots right here, and then this plus sign. And as you can see, the information is already added, right? And then you just have to add the name and then create style. Now I've switched over to Framer and we'll create the text styles using this more efficient method. And we didn't use this method with the colors. We could, right? But adding the colors with the color picker or the color code is also very easy because it's only one thing that you have to add, right? That's why I created the color styles manually by clicking here. So to create the text styles, we select the text. In this case, we will start with the title. And then here in the properties panel, where it says styles, we click here and then new style. And then this will be the style for the heading one. So we apply it. And now you can see it right here. Now let's rename it by right clicking and then clicking on rename. And we'll call it titles and then desktop. Now Framer will add automatically here the font size and the line height for your reference. Now let's create the next style, which is for the CTA. So we select it and then we do the same thing here and then a new style. And then in this case, we'll choose paragraph and we will add a custom name, but don't use the, the headings because these are for titles and subtitles and so on. All right. So choose paragraph. And then we go here and then we right click and then rename. And then we write CTA text desktop. We press enter and then now create the rest of the text styles. All right, so now we have all the text styles and you can reorder them by just dragging. So feel free to do so. I know that creating all these styles is a little bit tedious, but it will save us a lot of time later on. Now let's go to the homepage. Let's click on, pages and then homepage. And what we'll do now is basically duplicate the homepage and then we'll create a template. And every time we, want to create a new page, we'll use that template. And we'll do that in order to conserve the grids. Before creating the template, we have to resize this breakpoint since we are using the 1440 breakpoint in Figma. So here in the properties panel, let's change it to 1440. Let's move it here. And that's it. Now we go here and then we right click and then we click on duplicate. And now we double click and rename this to template. And now here we have the template. And every time we create a new page, we'll basically duplicate this. All right. So let's click and then let's rename these components. And here we basically host all of our components. Now let's switch over to Figma and then let's go to the components page. And then we'll start creating the desktop components. And the first one we'll create is the header. So let's select it. And then here in the properties panel, we can check the width, which is 1360, and then the height, 89 pixels. And this width and this height are temporary, okay? Because when we create the component in Framer and we place the instance inside of the pages, we'll set the width to fill container and then the height to fit. So these units don't really matter, right? They are temporary. However, when you are working with a developer or with a team, it's better if you already set the right properties here in Figma. So basically you set the width to fill container and then the height to hug. But in this case, since we are doing also the development, it doesn't really matter. When you access the Figma file, you will probably see this set to fill container and hug. And that's because at the end, I like to do a check and make sure all components are set correctly, because you never know when you will bring in someone to work on the project, right? So feel free to set it in Figma to fixed, or if you prefer, you can also set it to fill container and hug, because that's even better. So do whatever you want. Now let's switch over to Framer. And for now, we can delete these two breakpoints because we'll focus on the desktop components. So right click and then delete. Now let's select this frame and then let's change the background color to black. Now while we have this frame selected, we press F on our keyboard and then we draw a frame, something like this. And then now in the properties panel, let's add the width, which was 1360, and then the height, 89 pixels. And then let's click here to align it to the center. And now while we have the frame selected, we go to the properties panel right here, and then we remove the color, and then we add a border, like a temporary border. So we click, and then we change these to white, just so we can see the frame. We will remove it later. Now let's switch over to Figma again, and now we'll basically add the logo. Let's increase the border a little bit. So let's select the frame, and then in the properties panel, we click, and then we change it to 3. Now, while we have the frame selected, let's press F on our keyboard, and then let's draw another frame inside of it. And then we'll do the same thing. Here in the properties panel, we remove the color, and then we add a border. We change the color to white, and then we go back, and then we change this to 3. Now, while we have this frame selected, we press T on our keyboard, then we click, and then we write the logo. In my case, my full name. The text is not very visible, but we'll fix it. Now let's switch over to Figma, and then let's press Ctrl and click to select this text. And then in the properties panel, we can see that this is the text style, okay? Medium text desktop. So let's switch over again to Framer, and while we have the text selected, let's go to the properties panel, and then here where it says style, we click, and then we apply this style. And now let's add a color, which will be white. Now let's move it a little bit right here for now. Now back in Figma, and we'll draw this frame in Framer, okay? And we don't have to always look at the size, because we'll apply auto layout, right? So we just have to draw something similar to this for now. Before we continue, make sure to click here where it says layers, so you can see the structure of all the layers. At the time of this recording, Framer doesn't have a way to automatically rename the layers, right? So we have to rename them manually. For personal projects, it's not mandatory, right? It doesn't matter if you don't, rename the layers. However, it's a good idea to get used to it. That way, when you design a project for a client and then build it, renaming layers will come naturally. To rename the layers, you simply double click and then you rename them. We can call this one header container, and then this one. Now let's select this frame, okay, the header container, and then we press F on our keyboard, and then we draw a frame inside of it, which will be the navigation container. Now we do the same thing we did with the other frames. Now we rename the frame. Now inside of this frame, we'll create another frame, which will be for the menu items. So we press F, and then we draw a frame, and then we do exactly the same thing. Now let's write here menu item. And then we apply the text style, and we add a color. Now let's go back to Figma, and then we can see how we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 menu items. So here in Framer, let's select this frame, and then let's rename it to menu item container. And then while we have this frame selected, we press Alt, and then we drag to create a copy, and then another copy, and then the fourth copy. Now we can hide the grid by pressing Alt-G on our keyboard. Now we'll activate auto layout. And here in Framer, it's not called auto layout, right? It's called stacks, but it's essentially the same thing. Let's start by activating it on this frame. So let's select it and then press Shift A, just like in Figma. Now here in Figma, when we select this frame, we can see the properties, okay? So it's set to hug, right? And here in Framer, we can see the properties set to fit, which is the same thing. So fit is hug, all right? Now here in Figma, we can also see how the menu navigation container, it's also set to hug. Now let's select the menu navigation container here in our Framer, and then let's press Shift A to activate auto layout. Now here in Figma, we can check the properties right here. Okay, and we can see that the spacing between items is 48 pixels. And then the padding is 32 pixels on all sides. Oh, and don't worry about the alignment because it makes no difference, right? Like if we change the alignment, it makes no difference because it's set to hug, all right? So there is no space for it to be aligned in a different position. So while we have this frame selected, we go here in the properties panel, and then we apply the properties. This option is to set the padding individually, right? But in this case, we want to add the same padding on all sides. So we write here 32 pixels, and then the gap, which is the space between items, to 48 pixels. Now let's show the grid by pressing Alt-G on our keyboard. And then let's select this frame, okay, the header container. And then let's activate auto layout, Shift A. Now here in the properties panel, let's set it to fixed. Then let's resize it to align with the grid. And now in the properties panel where it says distribute, we change it to space between. Okay. Now let's hide the grid by pressing Alt-G on our keyboard. And then now we'll start formatting the header. Now here in Figma, we check the colors. So we have this frame selected, the menu navigation container. And we can see here in the properties panel that we are using the dark graphite color. We can see it here as well. Now here in Framer, we select the frame, and then here in the properties panel where it says fill, we click, and then we select dark graphite. Now we can remove all the borders, and we don't have to remove them individually, right? We can just select all these, and then in the properties panel, we remove the border right here. Now here in Figma, we can see that the corner radius is 6. So let's apply the corner radius here in Framer. So let's select the frame, and here in the properties panel, where it says radius, we change it to 6. And now the corner radius is applied. Okay. Now let's create the bouquet call button. And to do so, let's select this frame and then right click and duplicate. And now remove all these menu items, okay, these frames. And then this one, you can write here, bouquet call, right? And then we'll change the background color to white here in the properties panel. And then we select the text that's inside, and then we change it to black. Now select the button and press the right arrow on your keyboard. Now let's select the button, and then let's change the name right here to CTA container. Then here, CTA item container. Now here in Figma, we can see how these navigation menu and then the button are grouped inside of an auto layout frame. So let's do the same thing in Framer. In order to add these two frames inside of an auto layout frame or a stack here in Framer, we have to select both. Like we click and then press Shift and then select the other one. And here we can't just press Shift A, all right? It doesn't work like that. We have to right click, and then here where it says Add Stack, we click. Now they are grouped, all right, inside of a stack. And what we have to do is here in the properties panel, we change these to fit content. And then the gap, we change it to 32 pixels. Now let's rename the menu items. So let's select the text, and here we write work. And then here we write playground. And then here, about, and then here, contact. Now here in Figma, when we select the frame containing the menu item, we can see in the properties panel that they are set to hug, right? So we have to do the same thing in Framer. All right, so here in Framer, we select this frame. Make sure you are not selecting the text directly, right? You are selecting the frame containing the text. And then you press and maintain Shift, and then you select this one, and then this one, and then this one. And now here in the properties panel, you set these to fit content, and then these to fit content. And then you do the same thing with the frame containing the bouquet call text. You go to the properties panel, and then fit content, and then fit content. Now let's make sure this is responsive, okay? Because if we resize the main frame, we can see that this is not responsive. Let me show you. If we click here, and then here we resize this, we can see how it's not responsive. And in Figma, we would basically select this main frame and then activate auto layout, right? But we cannot do that in Framer. So we'll consider this frame as the primary or root frame, and then we'll create a main frame, which will contain all the other frames. So let's create a frame by pressing F on our keyboard, and then we draw something like this. And then we go to the properties panel, and then we remove the color, and we add a border. All right, and now we have to convert this frame into a stack. So activate auto layout, right? And in Figma, we can do it by selecting the frame and then pressing Shift A, but it doesn't work in Framer if the frame is empty, okay? So it has to have something inside. If the frame is empty, we right click and then click on add stack. You can also use this shortcut, all right? The problem with this though is that the frame we had didn't convert to a stack. It was basically added inside of a stack, right? This is the frame. And we don't want that. I wanted to show you this because you are probably used to pressing Shift A all the time. And here in Framer, it's a little bit different. If the frame had all the nested frames inside, this wouldn't happen, okay? Let me give you an example. So if we go back, now we have the frame, and then I will create a frame inside. Now when we select the main frame and then we press Shift A, it converts to a stack, okay? So instead of creating a new frame, what we'll do is select this frame, all right, the header, and then we right click, and then we click on add stack. You can also use this shortcut, okay? And now we have the stack, and we can change the name to main container. Main container. Now let's select the header container, and then we'll change the width to fill. All right. Now let's see how it behaves when we resize the window. As you can see, it's responsive. Let's go back. And now let's add the padding. Let's switch over to Figma. Now here in Figma, we go to the design page. And then let's zoom. And then we select this main frame. And then in the properties panel right here, we can see how the padding is 40 pixels, okay, on all sides. Now let's select the main frame, and don't do it by clicking on this frame because you will accidentally select the header container. So select it here directly in the layers panel. Now we go to the properties panel right here, and then we add a 40 pixel padding on all sides. Now let's align this frame to the top right here. Now let's click anywhere here and then press Alt G to show the grid and make sure that everything is perfectly aligned. Let's now hide the grid by pressing Alt plus G. And then here in the layers panel, we select the header container. Then we right click and then we click on create component. This will pop up. And then let's modify the name by adding this dark mode desktop and then create. Let's close this. So here in Framer, every time we create a component, the component is isolated inside of the component canvas, okay? Which is where we are right now. Whenever you want to go back to the design page, you can just click here. All right, and you will be taken back. And then you can double click on the component to go back to the component canvas. So here we have different options and we can create a variant right here. So for example, for tablet and mobile, we'll create different variants. And then here we have the hover state, which is basically a temporary variant. Okay, so let's say we want this button to turn to a different color when we hover. We can do that with this option. Let me show you how it works. So when we click here, right, and then we click on hover, now we have the hover version, okay? And then I will now change the background color on this button here in the properties panel. We'll change it to this color. And then I will also change the text to white. While I was setting the color, the background color for this button, I just noticed that this orange color is not accessible when combined with the white text. So let's fix it. It's basically the color we are using here. All right. And also here. So here in Figma, we go to the style guide. And then let me zoom here. We'll change this color. But first, we have to make sure that the color combination is, not accessible, and then change it. And we'll use Claude for this. Let's copy the color code. Now I'm here inside of the Claude web app, and I will write this. Can you tell me if this color combination and then I paste the color code. And then I will say, and then press enter. So now here we have the result. And as we can see, it only passes this test. And it's funny because here the AI is telling us that it doesn't pass the AA level requirement. And here it's telling us that it passes the test. So I wrote this, and then Claude responded this. So you have to be very careful when using AI and always double check. In this case, what I did to double check is to visit this website, okay? And then I checked at the information it provided me after adding the color codes. And I compared this with what Claude said to make sure I make a more informed decision. And you don't have to use this website specifically. There are many like this throughout the internet. Now I will ask Claude to give me some color combination alternatives that are accessible, and we'll choose one. So here we can write something like this. Here is the result, and this is the original color, all right, which is not totally accessible. And then we have this darker shade, and this is the color we'll use. So let's copy the color code. Now let's go back to this website, and then let's paste the color code here. So as we can see here, it passes the standard requirement for large text and also for normal text. And it fails to pass the strictest requirement for normal text, but it's fine because that isn't required for what we need it for. All right, so as you can see here, I've updated this color. So instead of clementine, it's now cinnamon. And the beauty of this is that when we update the color style, it updates the color throughout the entire design, as you can see here. Right? Now let's make sure we have the color code copied. I will just now copy this color code. And now here in Framer, I will go to Assets. And then I will update the color style by pasting the color code right here. And then I will also rename the color. All right, so let's continue with the component. So here we have the primary variant, and then here we have the hover state. And then when we preview the live website right here, and then we hover, we can see how this button changes. But this is not ideal because we want the background color of this button to change only when we hover the button, okay? But now what happens is, now it changes whenever we hover anywhere within the header container. I will show you how to do that right now. Let's go to the components page. Let's remove the hover state, and then we select this button. We right click and then create component. Then we click on create. So now we have the button right here, And this is now a nested component. Okay, so it's a component inside of this component. Now let's click here to create the hover state. And then while we have this button selected, let's change the color. So the background will be cinnamon, and then the text will be white. Now when we preview this, we can see how it works perfectly. Now let's see if it works in the main component. So let's go back, and then let's click here, and then let's preview. And now it works perfectly, all right? The hover state only activates when we hover over the button and not anywhere else. Let's go back. So if you are wondering why I didn't design the variants in Figma, it's because I will teach you how variants work in the next module, all right? All right, so now we'll create a variant of this component here in Framer for each breakpoint. Let's select the main component, and then here where it says variant, we click. And then now we have the main component, and then we have the variant right here. Okay, it's named by default variant 2. And this will be the tablet version of the header. So here in the layers panel, we can already change the names for variant 1 and 2. This is the main variant, right? That's why it says primary. So let's change the name to desktop and then tablet. All right, so now here in Figma, we'll basically check the properties of the tablet version of the component. So we select it, and then here in the properties panel, we can see how it's set to fill container, and then the spacing is automatic, and then it has a 0 padding. And the menu also changes, right? The navigation menu. Instead of the full navigation menu, it's just a button, right? So let's recreate it in Framer. Here we can already remove the bouquet call button. And then we'll remove all the menu items except for one, okay? So here in the layers panel, we can select 3, okay? So 1, 2, and 3, we can make sure they are selected. And then we remove them. And then here, instead of contact, we will change it to menu. Now let's make these smaller. And don't worry too much about the exact size, because we'll basically set these to fill later on, okay? Now let's select this text, and then while we press and maintain Shift, let's select this text, and then here in the properties panel, we will change these to medium text tablet. Now let's create the mobile variant, and we can do that by selecting the tablet variant, and then here we click where it says variant. It's basically the same process, all right? Now let's go to the layers panel, and then let's change the name of the variant. Now we do the same thing we did with the tablet variant. So we resize this a little bit, and then we select this, press and maintain Shift, we select this, and then in the properties panel, we change the text style to medium text mobile. Now, since we'll use this component for desktop, tablet, and mobile, we'll change the name. Right here, we double click and then rename, and then we'll remove this part, okay? Now let's see if this works. So let's go to the components page right here, and then let's select this frame. All right, this one, the main container. Then we go to the home page. We change the background to black. And then we paste. Now let's select the component in the tablet breakpoint. And then here in the properties panel, where it says variant, we change it to tablet. And then we select the component in the mobile breakpoint, and we do the same thing. And then we choose mobile. Now let's test and see if it works. So we click on preview, And then as we resize, we can see how it changes. So it works perfectly. Let's go back to the components page. Now let's switch over to Figma. Now it's time for you to practice. So here is an exercise. Create all these components in Framer and only the dark mode components, okay? And as always, if you have any questions, go to webdesignerscollective.com, join the community if you are not a member yet, and then ask any questions you have. Actually, I will create the next component so you don't get stuck, and then you will create the rest. Let's create a frame by pressing F on our keyboard, and then we draw a frame. Now let's show the grid, Alt plus G, and then let's move it here for now. Now here in Figma, we check the properties of this component. So we click, and then we can see that it's set to fixed, all right? And this is the size. And then inside, we have the image, which is set to fill, all right? And then the text is set to hug. Now we'll create the text that goes here. So we press T on our keyboard, and then we click, and then we write project name and discipline. Now while we have the text selected, we go to the properties panel, and then we apply the style, which is medium text desktop. Then we set the color to white. Now we select the frame, and then we press and maintain shift. Then we select the text, we right click, and then we click on add stack. Now in Figma, I will check again the size of this frame. So I will click on it, and then in the properties panel, I can see it's 664 and then 741. So now while we have the stack selected, we go here in the properties panel, and then we change this to fixed, and then we add 664, and then the height 741. Now let's select this frame, which will be the image, and then here we set it to fill, and then fill. And here in the properties panel, instead of using a color, we'll use an image. So we click here. Now we select the text, and then in the properties panel, we can see it's set to fit, okay? Which is the equivalent of hug in Figma. Now let's select the stack. And then in the properties panel, we align it to the left. Now I will change the name right here, and then I will name it project card dark mode desktop. And since this will be a component, you can name it, this way. And then as you create the variants, you can remove the desktop part and then the dark mode part after you set the light mode. And this is the way I like to do it, but you don't have to do it this way. You can just name it project card, all right? It's fine. Now let's add this stack inside of the main container. And to do it, we just drag, and then when we see this line, we can drop. And now we can see how it's inside of the main container. And now let's convert this into a component. So we right click and then create component. So we have the primary component, and the next step is to create the variants. Let's go back to the components page. And now you can continue by creating the different variants for the second component and then all the other components. So here we have all the components here in Framer. And as you can see, we have all the variants, right? For desktop, tablet, and mobile, okay? All these components, all right? So I hope you were able to create them. And if not, you can always ask inside of the community, okay? That way you will not get stuck. Now let's go to the home page. And let's continue with the design. Here in Figma, we can see this frame. All right. And this contains all the information that will go into the hero section. And we can already see that it's basically a frame with some nested frames inside. All right. So let's copy this text. All right. So copy the text, not the frame. Okay. Here is what I mean. This is what you have to copy, not this. All right. Just the text. In order to copy layers in Figma and then paste the layers in Framer, you have to have this plugin. All right. So install this plugin right now if you don't have it. Now you have to select the layer, in this case, this text, and then right click on plugins, and then click on Figma to HTML with Framer. And then now you can paste it here in Framer. We can also copy and paste multiple layers at once. And to do that, we just have to select this layer. So press Ctrl and click. Remember to do that if you want to select the text only, which is what we want right now. Because if you just click, you will select the frame, and you want to select the layer inside of the frame, which is the text, okay? And now we press Ctrl, then Shift, okay, to select the text, and then we click. And now we have these two layers selected. And then we right-click, we go to Plugins, and then we click here. Now we paste the text in Framer. Now let's select each one of these and let's add a stack. All right, to this one, and then to this one. Now let's select these three stacks while we press and retain Shift, and then we right click, and then we add the stack. Now while we have the stack selected, we go to the properties panel, and then here we change the direction to horizontal. Now let's rename these tags. This will be the hero container. Now let's select this container, and then we press and maintain Shift, and we select this container, and then we add a stack. And now while we have this stack selected, in the properties panel, we change the direction to vertical. Now we'll change this to space between, and then the height to fill. And now let's align it to the left. Now let's select this stack, and then let's change this to 190. And then let's select the text, and let's change it to fill. Now it looks how it's supposed to look. Now let's select the hero container, and then let's press Ctrl X to cut it. Then let's select the main container, and then let's press Ctrl V. And now the hero container is inside of the main container. Now here in Figma, we check for the spacing between these two sections, and it's 144 pixels. So here in Framer, we select the main container, and then in the properties panel, we change the gap to 144 pixels. Now let's select this stack, and then in the properties panel, we change the width to fit content. And then now we select the hero container, and then we change this to space between. Now it's time to work on the tablet breakpoint. So here in Figma, we can already see that the, in the tablet breakpoint, the layout is different. So let's set it this way in Framer. Since now we are focusing on the tablet breakpoint, let's collapse the desktop breakpoint right here in the layers panel. And then now we'll select this stack, but we'll do it in the layers panel to make sure we select the stack. And now let's drag it out right here for now. The next thing we'll do is to select the hero container, And then in the properties panel, we'll change the direction to vertical. And now while we have these stack selected, we change the height to fit content. Now in Figma, we check the spacing right here, which is 80 pixels. Now we select the hero container, and then we set this to start, and then the gap to 80 pixels. Now while we have the hero container selected, we align it to the left, and then we select the description container, all right? And then we set the width to fill. Now let's add this stack. Okay, so and to do it, let's go to the layers panel and then let's select it, all right? And then Control X to cut, and then we select the hero container and then we paste it. It's automatically added here. Now it's time to apply the text styles. So let's select this text layer and then we press Control. We select this one as well. And then in the properties panel, we set the style, which is large text tablet. And then we add the color white. And then we do the same thing here. Okay, we select it. And then we add small text tablet and then color white. Here in Figma, we can see that the spacing is 80 pixels, all right? So we'll set this spacing also at 80 pixels in Framer. So let's select the main container, and then let's change these to 80 pixels. Now let's collapse the tablet breakpoint so we can focus on the mobile breakpoint. Okay, so here in Figma, we can see how this section is set up almost the same way as the tablet version, right? The only thing that changes is the text style and the spacing. So let's set it up in Framer. All right, so here in Framer, let's go to the layers panel, and then let's expand the main container, and then let's select the hero container. And in the properties panel, let's set the direction to vertical. Now let's select this stack, and then let's move it out. Now let's select this stack and then this stack, and then let's set the width to fill. Now let's select this stack only, and then let's set the height to fit content. Now here in Figma, we check the spacing, and we can see it's 40 pixels. Now let's add this tag into the hero container. So let's cut it, Control plus X. And then we select the hero container and then we paste it here. Now we select the hero container. Then we change this to start. And then we set the spacing to 40 pixels. And now while we have the hero container selected, we align the items inside to the left. Now back in Figma, let's see which spacing we should set here. 80 pixels. So in Framer, let's select the main container, and then let's change the gap to 80 pixels. Now it's time to set the text styles. So let's select this layer, and then here in the properties panel, we select small text mobile, and then we set the color to white. Now we select the description, and then we do the same thing. We select large text mobile, then the color to white. Now we select the tagline, and then we set it to large text mobile, and then white. Now let's select the main container, and then let's change the padding to 16 pixels. Now here in Figma, I can see how this frame, this one, right, has a width of 160 pixels. So let's change the width of this tag here in Framer to 160 pixels. Now it's time to check if the responsiveness of the website is working properly. So let's click here and then let's see. Excellent. Now let's go back to the home page. Now let's start working on the work section. This section, all right? And it's very easy, just a frame and then 2 nested frames and then 1 frame for each of these services. And we didn't create a component for this section because we are only using it in the home page. All right, so here in Framer, we press T on our keyboard and then we click and we write work. All right. Now, while we have this selected, here in the properties panel, we select the title style for desktop. Now let's set the color to white. Now we press T on our keyboard again, then we click, and then we write the first service, web design. And then here in the properties panel, we set it to small text desktop. And then we set the color to white. And now while we have the text selected, all right, we press Alt on our keyboard and then we make a copy and then we make another copy. Now we change this to branding and then these to consulting. And now we add a stack on each one. So we select it and then right click and add a stack. We do the same thing here and then the same thing here. Now here in the layers panel, we can rename these tags. Something like this. Now we select these 3 stacks while we press and maintain shift, and then we add a stack. And then we'll name this stack service list. Now let's select the title and then let's add a stack as well. And then let's change the name to title. Now we select the title container, then we press and maintain shift and select the service list container. And then in the properties panel, we change the width to fit content. Now we select the service container, so we press and maintain control and then we click here and then here. And then we change the width to fit content. Now let's select this stack and then we press and maintain shift. We select this stack as well. And then we right click and add a stack. And we can name this stack work container. Now here in the properties panel, we change the direction to horizontal and then space between. Now here in Figma, we have to check for the spacing between these items, which is 8 pixels. So let's set that up here in Framer. So we select the service list container and then we change the gap to 8 pixels. And now while we have the service list container selected, we also change the alignment and align it to the left. Now it's time to add this container inside of the main container. So here in the layers panel, we select this container and then we press Ctrl X to cut it. And then we select the main container and then we press Ctrl V to paste it. And now we just have to simply change the text styles in the tablet breakpoint and also in the mobile breakpoint. Here I've set the text styles for the tablet breakpoint and then here for the mobile breakpoint. And you already know how to do it, so make sure you do it. Now let's click here to check the responsiveness. Excellent. Let's go back. Now it's time to add the future project section. Keep in mind that here in Figma, we are using a grid that wraps, right? But in Framer, we'll use a different method. Basically, we'll create two stacks, all right? And then each of these stacks will have two project cards. So the implementation will be different, but it will look exactly like this. The only difference is that creating two stacks is better for responsiveness. All right, so here in Framer, we have to go to the components page. And then we select this component and then we copy it. We go back to the home page and then we paste it right here. Now, while we have this frame selected, we press Alt and then we drag to create a copy. And now we go here in the layers panel and then we select both by pressing and maintaining Shift. Then we right click and then click on Add Stack. Now here in the properties panel, we set the direction to horizontal. Now here in Figma, let's check the spacing, which is 32 pixels. Now back in Framer, while we have the stack selected, all right, we set the spacing to 32 pixels. Now let's select each one of the components individually, and then let's add a stack. And then this one as well. Now let's rename the layers. This will be called featured projects container. And then this will be called project card container. And this the same thing. Now let's select this container. And then let's press Ctrl X to cut it. And then we select the main container and then we paste it here. Now when we preview the page right here, we can see how these instances are fixed, right? We want the images to expand or shrink as we resize the screen. And we'll do that right now. Go back. Now let's select this instance and then we press and maintain Shift and we select this instance as well. And now we have both instances selected. Then we go to the properties panel and then we click here on this lag icon to lag the aspect ratio. All right. And then we set the width to fill. Now let's select the primary stack, this one. And then let's set the height to fit content. Now let's check the responsiveness again. It works. Let's go back. Now let's duplicate this stack. All right, so while we have this stack selected, we can press Ctrl C and then Ctrl V. Now we select this stack and then we press and maintain Shift and we select this stack. So these two stacks, right? And then we right click and then we we click on Add Stack. Now here in Figma, we check this spacing, which is 56 pixels. Now in Framer, while we have this stack selected, we go to the properties panel and then we change the gap to 56 pixels. Now let's set the tablet and the mobile variant. So let's start with the tablet. So we select this instance and then we press and maintain Shift. We select this instance and this one, like all of them. And then in the properties panel, we change the variant to tablet. And then we do the same thing in the mobile breakpoint. So we select this one, press and maintain Shift. We select this one and this one and this one. And then in the properties panel, we change this to mobile. Now here in the mobile breakpoint, we select this stack. So this one. And then we change the direction to vertical. Now we select the other one, this one, and then we do the same thing. Now it looks like this, which is exactly what we want. Now let's test the responsiveness. Excellent. Let's go back. Now let's add these images. And before adding the images, we have to create some variables. Not variants, but the variables. Let me show you. Let's double click on this instance, for example. Now let's say we want to add an image. If we click here and then we add an image in the properties panel right here, what happens is when we go back to the home page, this is applied to all the instances, right? And this is not what we want, because here we have to add a different image, and here a different image, and here a different image, right? And to do that, we have to create variables. So let me reset. And let's select this image, right? So this layer. And then here in the properties panel, we click on fill, and then we select create variable, and then we click on image. And this will pop up, and we'll add a placeholder. So let's change the name to placeholder. And then let's click here and then choose an image. I will choose this image. Now let's go back to the home page. And then while we have this instance selected, we can see here in the properties panel how we can click here and then add an image. I will add this one. And now if we select this instance and we do the same thing, we click here, we can add a different image. I've added all the images, as you can see, and now we have to also create a variable for this text. So we double click on the instance, then we select the text, and then in the properties panel where it says content, we click here and then create variable and then plain text. And now this will pop up, and then we can change the name to project name. Now let's go back to the home page. And then we select one of the instances, right? And then here in the properties panel, we can see the variable. So we can remove this text and then add the project name. And now it changes here. And as you can see, it only changes here in this instance, not here, which is exactly what we want. Now I've added all the project names, all right? But then here in the tablet breakpoint and in the mobile breakpoint, I noticed that this text goes out of frame. So let's fix it. Let's double click on this instance. And then here we set the height of the component to fit content. This will make the height to adapt to whatever content is inside. Now let's select the image. And then let's lock the aspect ratio by clicking on this icon, right? And this will basically maintain the aspect ratio of the image as we resize our screen. Now let's select the text, and then let's change the width to fill. With this setting, we make sure the text stays within this tag instead of going out of frame, right? Because if we set it to fit, it will try to fit the text. And if the text is too long, it will go out of frame. Let me show you what I mean. So if I set this back to fit content, and I go to the home page, and then I make these text longer. Let me see. This is what happens, all right? It goes out of frame. However, if I set this text to fill, this is what happens. It stays within the frame, and the only thing we have to do left, while we have the instance selected, is to set the height to fit content. And now these two cards are not aligned properly, but we can fix it by selecting this stack, all right? This one, the one containing the two cards, and then we align the content to the top. And now it looks good. Now here in the desktop breakpoint, this is the instance that has the correct properties, all right? The width is set to fill, and then the height is set to fit. So let's select this instance, and then we press and maintain shift, and then we select this one, and then this one, and then we set the same properties. Here, fit content. And now we select this frame. All right, this one, the one containing these two cards here. And then we align the content to the top. And now we have to fix the cards here in the tablet breakpoint. So we double click here. And then while we have the component selected, we set the height to fit content. We do the same thing in the mobile breakpoint. Now, if I add a larger paragraph here in this instance, this is what happens. All right. It resizes automatically this card, pushing down the content below. Now, if you notice here in the tablet breakpoint, this text in this instance is different than this one, right? And that's because it has an override. So if you go here in the properties panel, you will see this in color blue. And then when you click, you can reset it, all right? And then now you can see the text. And whenever you change the text in this instance right here, now it will update also here and also here in the mobile breakpoint. All right, so now let's add here the project title. Now here in Figma, we'll check the spacing between this text and the image, right, inside of this component. So it's 32 pixels. Now here in Framer, let's go to the component. And then let's set the gap to 32 pixels. Now it looks good. Remember that here we have one stack, and then here we have another stack, right? And then here we have a spacing of 56 pixels, right? And the same thing here in the tablet breakpoint. But then in the mobile breakpoint, we have this stack placed horizontally, right? I mean, vertically, right? And then this one as well. So here we have two stacks, all right? And then we have this spacing, which is also 56 pixels. But then we have to change this, right? Because in this breakpoint, we want all the cards to have the same spacing between them. So make sure to select this stack, all right? The one containing the feature project containers inside of the mobile breakpoint. And then here in the properties panel, we change the gap to 32 pixels. And then here in the tablet breakpoint, I will actually change it to 40 pixels. I will update it here in Figma as well in the tablet breakpoint to 40 pixels. And I've noticed an inconsistency here in Figma because the space between the, the cards, the horizontal spacing is 24 pixels. And here in Framer, it's set to 32 pixels. All right. That's why if we activate the grid, we can see how they are not perfectly aligned, right? Now, if I select this stack and then here below, I press and maintain shift and select this stack. All right, so these two stacks. And then here in the properties panel, I change this gap to 34 pixels. Now I can see how this aligns perfectly with the grid. Now let's test the responsiveness. And as you can see, it's excellent. Making a website responsive and adaptive sometimes is very tedious, right? It's like a very tedious process because there are multiple ways to do it, and sometimes you will get stuck But it's very important that you invest time in really understanding the concept of responsiveness, because once you get it right, it's very satisfying. Now let's check here in Figma which element we should add, which is the CTA. So here in Framer, let's go to the components page. And then let's copy this component. Let's go back to the home page. Then let's select the main container layer, this one. And then let's paste the component. Now let's select this stack. All right, the one containing the feature projects containers. And then let's select the instance, the CTA instance. All right. And then let's right click and then add stack. Now here in Figma, we check for the spacing. It's 120 pixels. So now here in Framer, we select this stack, this one. All right. And then in the properties panel, we change the gap to 120 pixels. Now here in Figma, we can check the spacing here in the tablet breakpoint, 72 pixels, and then also in the mobile breakpoint, 80 pixels. So we select this stack here in the tablet breakpoint, all right? And then in the properties panel, we change this to 72 pixels. And then we select the one in the mobile breakpoint, and then we change it to 80 pixels. Now we select this instance in the tablet breakpoint. And then in the properties panel, we change the variant to tablet. And then we do the same thing here in the mobile breakpoint. We select it and change the variant to mobile. All right, so I'm here in Framer, and the next thing we have to add is the footer. And then after adding the footer, we'll basically create, like a stack, which will be a combination of this frame and then the footer. All right, and then it's going to have a spacing of 200 pixels, and then the tablet version is going to have a spacing of 200 pixels as well. And then the mobile version is going to have a spacing of 120 pixels. So here in Framer, we go to the components page. We have to look for the footer right here. Then we copy it. And then we go back to the home page. We select the main container, this one, and then we paste it here. And now we can see the footer right here. Now let's change the variant here in the tablet breakpoint, and then also in the mobile breakpoint. Now let's select the footer, and then let's press and maintain shift, and then let's select this stack, and then we right click and we add a stack. And now while we have this new stack selected, we go here in the layers panel and then we double click to change the name, because sometimes when it's difficult to click on a stack, I like to rename it so I can select it here directly in the layers panel. So we can name it something like this. And now while we have it selected, we go to the properties panel, and then we add the gap, which was for desktop 200 pixels. And then for the tablet breakpoint, we keep it at 200. And then for mobile, we change it to 120 pixels. Now let's check the responsiveness. Brilliant. Let's go back. So now it's time to develop this, expanded menu. in the tablet breakpoint and also in the mobile breakpoint. So when people access the website through a tablet or a phone, and then they click on this button, this menu will expand, all right? And then when they click on close, it will close. Now here in Framer, let's double click on this instance. Now we are here in the components page, and while we have this selected, we create a variant right here. Now we have the variant here. We can drag it right here, so it's below the tablet menu variant. Now, while we have this variant selected, let's change the name here in the layers panel. We double click and then we add a name like something like this. Now we select this stack and then we press and maintain shift and then select this stack. We right click and then we add a stack. And then we can name this stack something like logo plus menu container. Now, while we have this stack selected, let's right click and then reset the overrides. Now let's select the logo plus menu container here in the desktop breakpoint, all right? And then in the properties panel, we change the distribution to space between. At the moment we created this tag, in this variant, it created some overrides, okay? And then since it's still connected to the other variants also changed. So we basically went back to the primary variant after removing the overrides, and then we set the spacing, like the space between setting for this stack. And now it's updated throughout all the variants. If you are wondering why we went to the primary variant and we didn't set the space between property here in this variant, it's because at the moment we created the stack inside of this variant, it created an override. So basically, it created the stack in the other variants, as I said, right? But then all the changes and all the edits we make to this variant stays in this variant. So we had to remove the overrides and then go to the primary one and then make all the necessary changes in order to apply them to all the other variants. Let me show you how overrides work. So let's say we want to change the color of this button to orange. Here in the properties panel, when I change the color to orange or cinnamon, right, we can see how the fill property turns to purple. And this means that we have an override now. And as you can see, it only applies this color on this variant. And now I can remove this specific override by clicking here and then reset override, okay? Or I can reset all overrides by selecting this variant and then right clicking and then click on reset overrides, all right? So I will reset this override now. All right, so let's continue. Now let's select this variant and then make sure you select the variant, all right? And not the stack that's inside of the variant. And then here in the properties panel, we'll set the height to something like 1000 pixels. And this is temporary, okay? And then in the properties panel, let's align the content to the top. We can even add a temporary border in order to see the limits of the variant a little bit better. Maybe let's set it to 3 pixels. Now let's create the menu items by clicking here on the canvas and then pressing T on our keyboard. Then we click again and then we write work. Now while we have the text selected, we'll go to the properties panel. We click here to select the text style and then we'll apply the titles text style for tablet. Now we change the color to white. And now we have to rename this stack, all right? So we change the name to menu item container. Now while we have this stack selected, we press and maintain Alt, we click and then we drag and we make 3 copies. Now let's select all the menu item stacks and then we press Ctrl X to cut. and then we select this stack, all right, the expanded tablet menu, and then we press Ctrl V. And now while we have the menu item stack selected, we right click and then we add a stack. Then here in the properties panel, we choose the vertical direction. Now we select the main stack, this one. All right, make sure you select this one. And then we set the direction also to vertical. And then now while we have this stack selected, all right, we go to the properties panel and then we change the distribution to start. Now let's select this stack and then actually let's change the name to menu items, menu links container. And then we go to the properties panel and then we align it to the left. Now let's change these to close. Now let's select this stack again. And then in the properties panel, we'll add a fill. So we click here and then we select the color black. Now let's connect this button with this menu, all right, with the expanded menu. And to do so, we click on this button and then we click on this icon right here. And then we move the cursor and then we click right here. And then we do the same thing with this button. We click on this icon and then we click here. Now let's go back to the home page. And then let's check this to see how it works here. All right, so as you can see, when we click on this button, it pushes the content down, and this is not what we want, right? We want the menu to take over the entire screen. So let's set it up that way. The first thing we have to do is go back to the components page. So let's double click here. Now let's select this stack, all right, this one. And then in the properties panel, we set a min height. So we click here and then we click on min height and then we choose viewport to make sure that this stack covers the entire height of the screen. And now while we have this frame selected, all right, we go back to the properties panel and then we change the distribution to start. Now we select the parent stack, this one. And then in the properties panel, we change the height to fit content. And we did that because we already set this one, all right, to 100 VH, right, to cover the entire height of the screen. So this will be the minimum height. So whatever screen size we open is going to basically cover the entire height. But then the parent frame should fit the content, all right, instead of having a fixed height. Because if not, it wouldn't work, okay? It has to fit the content and then the nested stack, this one in this case, will be the one that dictates the height. Now let's go back to the home page. And then let's select the desktop header container. And then what we have to do now is basically move this out of the main container. So we drag it right here. And then in the properties panel, we change the position type to absolute. Now, since we set the header to absolute, we can see how the content that was below the header now overlaps with the header, right? And to fix it, we'll basically select the main container. And then in the properties panel, we'll set the top padding to 200 pixels. And now we can see how it's set correctly, right? Now let's select the header. And then let's set the width to fit content. I want to show you something. When we set this header to fit content, what happens is the header, the container tries to fit the content that's inside. And then when we click on preview right here, we can see that when we stretch the screen, the header doesn't stretch, right? And we want it to occupy the same space horizontally as this content, all right? So let's set it up. So let's select the header, and then here in the properties panel, we change the width to 100%. It will automatically be set to a relative, all right? And now, as you can see, it stretches when we preview. and we resize the screen, we can see how it behaves how we want, right? Still, we have to change it because, we have to add some padding on the sides because it doesn't have the padding, right? So we have to add a 40 pixel padding for the desktop version. So let's do it right now. Let's go to the properties panel, and then here we write 40 pixels, and then here 40 as well. Now it looks good. As you can see here in the properties panel, after setting the padding on each side, you can see how Framer turns this into fixed automatically. This change isn't about locking the element's position to the viewport, but it ensures that the padding fits inside of the 100% width rather than adding to it. So Framer basically uses fix to handle this adjustment while keeping the responsive behavior intact. Now let's select the header in the tablet breakpoint, and then let's press and maintain shift, and we select the header in the mobile breakpoint. And now here in the properties panel, let's set the padding on the sides to 0. Now let's go to the components page. And now while we have the tablet variant selected, let's go to the properties panel and let's set the padding to 40 pixels on all sides. Let's move it up a little bit. Now let's do the same thing with the mobile variant. So we select it, and then we set the padding to 16 pixels in this case. Now let's do the same thing with the expanded tablet menu variant. So let's click here to select the header, and then let's add a 40 pixel padding on all sides. Now let's select this stack, all right, this one, and then let's set the padding to 40 pixels on all sides. Now let's select the variant, and then let's remove the border. Now let's test to see if it works. All right, it works, but then when we scroll down, we can see the rest of the content right here, all right? Let's fix that. So let's select the header in the tablet breakpoint. And now in the properties panel, let's change the type to fixed. Now let's see if it works. All right, perfect. Now let's go back to the components page. Now let's select this button, and then let's copy it, and then paste it here. Now let's remove the logo here in the expanded tablet menu. So let's select it, and then here in the layers panel, let's make sure we are selecting the logo container and not the text, all right? And now let's press delete. Now let's select the book a call button right here, and then let's press the left key. Now let's double click on this button to go to the components page, and let's create a variant. And this variant will be the tablet variant. This one will be the desktop. Now let's select the text inside of the tablet variant. And let's change the style to this one. Now let's select the tablet variant, and let's create the mobile variant. And we do the same thing. We select the text, and then we change the text style. And now here in the header containers components page, we select this button, all right, and then we change the variant to tablet. Now here in the home page, we click here to preview, and then let's click on the menu. And as you can see, the button and the expanded menu are a little bit animated, right? How the button appears and how the menu expands. And we can change that. So let's see. Let's go back to the home page, then we go to the components page. And then here, while we have the variant selected, we can go to the properties panel, and then when it says transition, we can change it to instant, for example, right? And then we select the expanded tablet menu, and we do the same thing. We change it to instant. Now let's go back to the home page, and then let's preview. And now as you can see, the elements appear instantly. Let's go back to the components page. And with the transition option, you can basically change, the transition, all right? You can play with it right here and then see how it works. Now let's rename the menu item. So this will be playground. And then now we have to set the container to fit content. And then let's do the same thing with the other two containers and also this one. All right. So all the containers, we set them to fit content. And let's set the height to fit content as well. Now let's continue renaming them. And now let's create the mobile variant of the expanded menu. Let's select this variant. And then let's click here to create the mobile variant. Now let's change the name. Now let's select each one of these menu items by clicking and then pressing and maintaining shift and then selecting the rest. And then here in the properties panel, we change the text style to the mobile text style, this one. Now let's select this variant and then we resize it to align with the header like this. Now let's select this button. And then here in the properties panel, we change the variant to mobile. And then let's select the text inside of this button. And then in the properties panel, we change the text style to the mobile version, which is this one. Let's click on the header to select it. And then in the properties panel, we change the padding to 16 pixels. And then we do the same thing here. We select this stack by clicking. And then in the properties panel, we change it to 16 pixels. Now let's connect this button to the mobile header, right? Because right now it's connected to the tablet breakpoint. To do it, let's click on this little icon right here. And then let's click on the mobile header. Now it's connected. Now let's click on this button to select it. And then let's click on this icon. And now let's click inside of the expanded mobile menu to connect them. Now let's select the mobile header. And then in the properties panel, we change the transition to instant. Now let's go to the home page. And then let's see how it looks. Brilliant. But when we open the menu and we scroll down, we can see the content that's behind, right? So let's fix that. To fix that, we go to the home page. Here on the mobile breakpoint, we select the header and then we change the variant here in the properties panel to expanded mobile menu. And now we have to change the type to fixed. Now we can preview. And it works. Now let's go back to the home page. And then while we have the header selected, we change the variant back to mobile. Next, we'll start working on the behavior of the header. But first, let's add a 40 pixel spacing between this header, all right, in the desktop breakpoint and the top edge of the primary stack. So let's select the header here in the desktop breakpoint, and then here in the properties panel, we change the type to fixed, and then we set the top position to 40 pixels. And now this means that we have a 40 pixel spacing between the header and the top edge of the primary stack. Now what we have to do is select the header here in the tablet breakpoint, and we press and maintain shift, and we select it also in the mobile breakpoint because we want to remove this spacing right here, all right? Since the tablet and the mobile headers already have padding inside of the component. So let's go to the properties panel and then let's set these to 0. All right, so now let's work on the behavior of the header. So let's click on preview. And then as we can see, when we scroll down, the header stays here at the top, right? But this is not ideal because it's taking too much space, and you cannot even see the logo when the item behind it is white. So let's change that. What we'll do is basically make the entire header disappear when we scroll down, and then make it appear when we scroll up, and not up all the way. Like, let's say we go, to the bottom of the website, and then we scroll up, it will appear. And then when we scroll down, it will disappear. And this will wow the user, because the user will expect the header to appear when we scroll all the way up, right? But then they will scroll up a little bit and then it will appear. And then when they scroll down, it will disappear. The logo will only appear at the top of the page. So when the user scrolls down, the logo will disappear. And the only way to make it appear is to scroll all the way up. And we set the logo this way because when we scroll down, the logo will overlap with objects or elements that have a similar or the same color as the background, and we don't want that. All right, so let's go to the home page. All right, so let's click on this header, all right, to go to the components page. And now let's create a variant of this component. So right now, while we have this this variant selected, right, we create another variant by clicking here. And now we can move this variant right here. Now, while we have this variant selected, let's change the name to desktop, something like this. Now let's select the logo container that's inside of this variant. And in the properties panel, where it says visible, we change it to no. Now let's select this stack inside of the variant. And then in the properties panel, we change the distribution to end. This way, this navigation menu will be aligned to the right. Now let's go back to the home page. And when we preview, we can see how the behavior of the header is not what we want, right? Because we want it to extend all the way. And this happened because we changed the type from absolute to fixed. So let's write here 100%. It will change to relative automatically. And then let's add 40 pixels on each side. Now, if we preview, we can see how it works. Now let's set the header so when we scroll down, it disappears. To do it, let's go to the components page. And then while we have the primary variant selected, here in the properties panel, we click on effects, and then we click on scroll animation. Now we set the trigger to on scroll, the direction, replay, and the preset are already set correctly by default. And the effect as well, because we want it to disappear, and the opacity is already set to 0. Now we can close. Now let's go back to the home page. And then if we preview, we can see how the header disappears as we scroll down. And then it appears as we scroll up. But there is a problem, because when we scroll down and then we scroll up, if the logo overlaps with something that's white, it doesn't look good, right? So what we want to do is to make the logo disappear every time we scroll down past the header, right? And then even if we scroll up, the logo will still be hidden. But then when we scroll all the way up, the logo will appear right here. All right, let's set it up. Let's go back to the home page. And then while we have this stack selected, all right, the header, we'll create a reference point, right? Because we want this logo basically to disappear when we scroll down past this section. To set it up, let's go to the properties panel right here where it says scroll section. We click and then we add a name. Something like this. Now here in the properties panel, we go to effects, we click, and then we click on scroll variant. Now we change the trigger to section in view. And then we choose the section, which is the header desktop, right? And then we set the variant. We select the desktop hidden logo variant, right? Now when we preview, we can see how this is not working correctly, because when we scroll down and then up, nothing appears. And then we scroll all the way up and then down again, now it appears. And then when we scroll up again and then down and then up, nothing appears. So it's not working correctly. And that's because we have to set an effect to this variant, right? The hidden logo variant. So while we have this variant selected, we go to the properties panel and then we click on effects and then we click on scroll animation and then we set the trigger to on scroll, and that's it. Now let's go to the home page, and then when we preview again, now it will work perfectly, right? It disappears when we scroll down, it appears when we scroll up, right? And then when we scroll all the way up, the logo appears. All right, this is perfect. There is an issue though. When we resize the screen, we can see how the header is not behaving as expected, right? And that's because we have to set a variant for the tablet breakpoint and also for the mobile breakpoint. So let's go to the components page. And then while we have the tablet header selected, we create a variant by clicking here. Now we can move the variant right here. Now let's rename it. Then let's select the logo container right here. And then here in the properties panel, we set the visibility to no. Now we select this stack and then we set the distribution to end. This way we move the menu button to the right again after hiding the logo. Now let's select this stack and then we can see how the the effect is already there. And that's because we already set the effect in the primary variant, which is the desktop variant. So now let's go back to the home page. Now let's select the tablet header. And then in the properties panel, we click on the effect. And then let's set the variant to tablet hidden logo. Now when we preview, we can see how the logo is not here. And also when we scroll down and up, we can see how the menu button is behaving the way it's supposed to. But there is a problem. The logo is not here. And this happens because here in the tablet header, there is no space above it, right? It's right on the edge. And we set it in a way where the logo appears after we pass this section, right? The problem is there is no space. So let me show you. Let's select this header, and then here we add a 10 pixel space, right? And now if we try, it will work, all right? But this is not what we want because we don't want that space. So let's go back to the properties panel and then let's set this back to 0. So instead, what we'll do is set this section, all right? The hero section instead of the header. So we select the hero section and then in the properties panel where it says scroll section, we add a name, hero section. Now let's select the desktop header and then in the properties panel below effects, we click on variant and then we change the section to hero section. And we do the same thing with the tablet header. We change it to hero section. And now when we preview, we can see how it works. And we can see how it also works in the tablet breakpoint. Now let's follow the same steps to set it in the mobile breakpoint. So we double click and then in the components page, we create a variant. Then we move it right here and then we change the name. Now we select the logo container and then we hide it right here in the properties panel. Then we select this container and then we set the distribution to end. Now here in the home page, we make sure we have the mobile header selected. And then in the properties panel below effects, we click on variant, and then we change this to mobile hidden logo. Now let's test it. And as we can see, it works. However, there is an issue. If we scroll down past the hero section, all right, and then we scroll up and we click on the menu and then we close it, as you can see, we can see the logo. And it doesn't matter where we scroll. When we scroll up, it will appear. And this is not what we want, right? We want the logo to always disappear after we scroll down past the hero section, right? Let me show you why this happens. Let's go back to the home page. And then here, let's click so we go to the components page. And as we can see right here, this button links directly to this header. So every time we click, this header will appear right after the expanded menu closes. And this is somehow problematic because when we scroll down the page, this is the header that should appear. Designing for the web often involves striking a balance between ambition and practicality. Initially, I consider a header that changes the visibility of the logo dynamically based on scroll and menu states on all breakpoints. However, implementing this behavior involves more advanced logic and custom code as well, which might feel overwhelming at this stage. Instead, we'll simplify the design to focus on the essentials of building an interactive and responsive header. As you grow more confident, you will be able to incorporate more complex scroll logic and other dynamic behaviors. And I wanted to show you all this because this is the natural course of designing a website, right? Like sometimes you have a design and midway through the development phase, you change things. As long as the change makes the UI usable and beautiful, it's totally fine. Before we apply the changes in Framer, let's update first the design here in Figma. So let's zoom in. And then here in the tablet breakpoint, let's select this header, and then let's go to the main component. We right click and then go to main component. Now let's select this button, right? This one, this layer. And then in the properties panel, we remove the background color. Now let's select the header, this layer. And then in the properties panel, we click on fill. And then we set the dark graphite color as the background. Now, while we have the header selected in the properties panel, we set the border radius to 6. Now we can see here the smooth border radius. The next thing we have to do is to add padding to the logo, right? Because we want it to have the same padding as the menu button. And to do it, we just have to select the logo and then press Shift-A to create a frame. Now the logo is inside of an auto layout frame, and then in the properties panel, we press Ctrl and then we click here, and then we set the padding to 32 pixels. Now while we have the logo's frame selected, in the properties panel, we set the width to hug. And then we select the text, and then in the properties panel, we set it to hug as well. And that's it. Now we have the header component for the tablet breakpoint. We'll do the same thing in the mobile breakpoint, and we'll keep the header in the desktop breakpoint as it is. All right, so I just updated the mobile header. Now it's time to apply the changes here in Framer. So let's select the button, all right? And then let's remove the background color in the properties panel. And then let's select this frame, this stack, all right? The logo plus menu container. And then let's set the color to dark graphite. Now let's select the logo container, this stack, and then in the properties panel, we set a padding or all size of 32 pixels. Do the same thing in the mobile breakpoint, and then let's go to the home page to see how it looks. Now let's click on the header to go to the components page, and then we can remove the, the hidden logo variants. So this one, and then this one. Now we go back to the home page, and then while we have this header selected, we go to the properties panel, and then we remove this effect. Now we select the mobile header, and then we do the same thing. Now let's preview to see if everything works correctly. And as we can see, everything is working smoothly. Now let's resize the screen to check the mobile breakpoint. It's also working very well. Here in Figma, I've also updated the design of the light mode header components. Now I will show you a pro tip involving the breakpoints. If we preview the homepage in the desktop breakpoint and then we resize, we can see how it quickly changes to the tablet breakpoint. And this is not ideal because the jump is too big, right? From here to here. And a better approach is to create a new extra breakpoint. And this new breakpoint will be ideal for laptops and large tablets. And for laptops and large tablets, I like to create a breakpoint that's 1200 pixels wide. So let's add a name. We can call it laptop. And then the width, we set it to 1200. All right, so here is the new breakpoint. Let's move it here. And now if we preview, we can see how the jump between breakpoints is not as big. All right, so now we have the homepage completed and it's time to develop the rest of the pages. All right, so this is the final design. And as you can see here, I've added a new breakpoint for small phones. All right, so feel free to also add this breakpoint because I'm a perfectionist when it comes to responsiveness. So I wanted to make sure that users that access the website through a small phone have a good experience as well. As you can see, here are all the pages. We have the work page, the project page, the playground, the about page, the contact page, and the privacy policy page. Here in the components page, I've also added a new component, this one, all right, for all the different breakpoints. I've also added the links and the link styles as well. And I will show you how to add links right now. Let's go to the components page. And then let's add the footer links. So we click on this component. And then here we can see the two, footer menu items that we want to link. So we select one of them. And then in the properties panel where it says link, we click. And then here we can select a page, or we can also add a URL if we want to link to an external page or website. But in this case, we want to link it to the privacy policy page. And then here, I have the different link styles. You can create a new style by clicking here, and then you can edit these styles right here, all right? The beauty of using components is that every time we update a link, all right, it updates also throughout the entire website on all the different breakpoints. It basically saves us a lot of time. Another thing I want to mention is that I've updated the space between the footer and the content. So, throughout the different breakpoints. Here, for the desktop breakpoint, it's set to 200 pixels. And then for the tablet breakpoint, it's set to 160 pixels. And then for the mobile breakpoint, it's set to 120 pixels. Now let's go to the Assets tab right here. And as you can see here in the text styles, I've added, text styles for small phones. So make sure to add this. And then also make sure we are using, the color styles throughout the entire design, all right? So no color codes. Make sure all the elements that have a color, they should be using a color style. Here for the logo, I've created a new link style because since the logo is a link, as you can see here, I don't want it to, to be underlined when we hover, like these links. So I create a new style without underline on hover. And you can see the link style right here. And also an alternative color, which is black. All right. Let's preview the site. So it's fully responsive. And then let's see if all the links work. Beautiful. Everything working correctly. You can see the fluidity, right? In this design, I wanted to create this structure, all right, which is like an intentional misalignment of the different elements because I wanted you to practice different element positioning, which sometimes can be tricky. Now let's check the tablet and the mobile menus. So right here, we can see how it works perfectly. Let's check on mobile. Working perfectly as well. Let's now check the behavior of the header. Working as intended, all right. Let's see on tablet. Working as intended as well. And then let's see on desktop. Brilliant. Now it's time to quickly work on the final settings and then publish the website. Let's go to settings right here. Here we can change the title of the site. You can add your name and the portfolio, for example, or whatever. In my case, something like this. And then here we can change the description. And then here we will see a preview. Here we have some more advanced options. And then here we can change the icon of the site. We can also add an image to use as a social media preview. All right. And then here we can, add a password to the site if we want. We can add the Google Analytics tracking and also some custom code right here. And then after we add all the information we want here, we can click on save. And then here we have some more options like, to set the domain. Here we have the default URL, all right? But then we can also add a free Framer subdomain. In the real world, I would never use the subdomain, right? I would connect to a real domain name. But for the sake of this video, I will add a free Framer subdomain. Then we click here. And now this is the subdomain. Now to publish the site, we simply click on publish right here. And then when this little window pops up, it means that the site is published. And now if we click on the URL, the website will open. And once I'm here, I like to test and see if it works well in the browser, right? I like to check all the pages, the behavior of the header, all right? And finally, I like to test the website in different browsers as well and on my phone to make sure that everything looks nice, that everything is functional, and that's it. Congratulations on completing Module 10. Now you know how to design a portfolio in Figma and develop it using Framer. Remember what I said about developing your own workflow and style. Embrace your uniqueness and use it to create beautiful digital experiences. Don't let perfectionism hold you back, all right? Progress is better than perfection. Designing and developing a website involves many moving parts, and making mistakes is part of the process. Embrace them because they are completely normal and essential for growth. That being said, always aim for excellence.